It's been a while since we've actually connected one-on-one about Traumathon and how it works, but essentially we take a look at nostalgic horror from 8+ years ago and remember fondly what it is about these pieces of media that scared us. Hell, lots of the things we talk about usually isn't from something even relating to horror. Sometimes it's just something that freaks you out and sticks with you forever. With today's first entry, we're not going to look back too far into the past, yet it still will invoke a sense of nostalgia for many as it parodies the shows that we all grew up with. Talking, of course, about Too Many Cooks. Nearly 10 years have passed since Too Many Cooks first aired on Adult Swim. Actually, saying nearly 10 years have passed is like saying, okay, it's been 9 years, alright, fine. It was part of Adult Swim's infomercial series, which aired at 4 AM. A series that meant to invoke confusion to its audience, not just through the content within it, you know, content such as this, or this, fuck this. Jesus. Now, it was really meant to catch people off guard who were especially nocturnal and flipping through channels until eventually... yeah. Okay, but really, let's set up the environment here, and that should be easy because I think everyone has gone through this particular moment in their lives at least once. Picture this. It's way past midnight. 2 AM, 3 AM, 4 AM, one of those ungodly cursed hours of the night where pretty much the entire world has fallen asleep except you. You're alone with your thoughts, alone in the dark, nothing to do, nothing to really work on. I mean, you're just too tired to work. It's not like you're too tired to go to bed, though. You're conscious, but you're not too energetic. So what do? Well, let's face it, if you try to go to bed now, you'll likely just stay there on your phone for like 2 hours, so there's no point in that, right? All right, well, how about watching something on TV? You flip through channels, some movies are on, but not the good ones, just the ones that are cheap enough to air, not the ones that are good enough to show in the morning. It's boring. Turn on the TV guide and you see Cartoon Network has a program called Infomercials right now. Here's the thing, tons of other channels also have that Infomercials program on. That means everyone's playing those really boring and really shitty, sometimes really weird ads that are basically scams. That's just how it was. Boring. Nothing's on tonight, I guess. So, you go to bed. Like 90% of people who were in your shoes. But for the 10% of people who decided to, for some reason, check out Adult Swim on purpose or by accident, you're introduced to a surrealistic view of the modern sitcom that we Westerners have become accustomed to for nearly 80 years now. It's the same old stuff over and over again. A father, a mother, their 3 to 4 kids, the wacky side characters, could be a relative, could be a pervert, maybe some friends, moral lessons to learn along the way as well, and other stuff. And yet, in this video, it keeps going. It just keeps going. It keeps going to the point where it devolves into something else, changes genres multiple times, from a sitcom to a crime drama to a sci-fi adventure and even a G.I. Joe parody. All the while, the visuals get crazier. The narrative seems to lose itself. The cast was being chased by a strange balding man with a machete. He was everywhere. And one by one, he started taking down the remaining cast members until it was only him and Smarf, the puppet cat. With everyone dead or stuck in captioned hell, I guess, Smarf makes one last attempt to reset everything. But before he can, he dies in front of the button. It's unclear if he really pressed it or not. The next thing we know, hey, everyone's back. Awesome, rad, that's amazing. Uh-oh, but he's still around. Leaving it up to interpretation as to what the fuck you just watched. Seriously, what the fuck was that? That was Too Many Cooks! A little creation by Casper Kelly, a writer for many Adult Swim shows and co-creator for Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell. He and a skeleton crew gathered together to film everything they needed in about 2 to 3 days. The first iteration of Too Many Cooks was pretty simple actually, as it was going to just be the main theme repeated over and over again, but Mike Laszlo, the producer, encouraged him to get more creative, and more creative he got as it started to evolve into something far more than just a sitcom parody. It became a parody of really everything that's on TV, and possibly even a commentary on the television industry as a whole. Now, as complicated as the short seems, I think it's surprising to know that yeah, this was made in 2 to 3 days, at least filmed anyways, but the small window of opportunity they had to film everything doesn't really compare to how long it took to actually edit the video. That's where the real labor came in. in the form of editing this whole thing, which took over a year to complete, as really this whole project was more of a side thing and not really a full-time job for anyone. At one point, Casper Kelly wondered if anyone would find it funny other than him and his friends, who were working on it with him, notably Paul Painter, as both of them were pretty much doing the most heavy lifting in editing, and tried to make each other laugh anytime they could, which they did in between their work producing Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell. Yet that year-long labor paid off, as it turned out to be a fucking nightmare fest and one of the most unsettling and strangest fucking visuals you've ever seen from Adult Swim. It is a hell of a ride that I can't really do justice by describing, and this ain't even all of it. Tons of ideas they had already storyboarded unfortunately never made it to fruition. There's actually a well-written article that interviewed the entire cast about their experience working on the short that you can check out in the description. There's a ton of info that's mostly trivial, but interesting nonetheless. So if you want to know more, give it a read. But if you want to experience the short itself, then you'll have to watch it yourself, unless you've already done so, that is. And I wouldn't be surprised because it remains one of Adult Swim's most top viewed videos on their YouTube channel, which says a lot, because the only videos that do killer numbers on Adult Swim's channel are videos of Rick and Morty and one of Pibby, which, sorry, I know a lot of people have asked me to cover Pibby this year. It's too early. It's nostalgic horror. This came out 2 years ago. I'm sorry. So Too Many Cooks had a huge impact. Also, side note, I think this is the only YouTube title that has this special treatment, this font and color. I've never really seen that from pretty much any other video on YouTube. I could be wrong, but it's crazy. It's also surreal to see. So why is it that this video became so viral so fast? I mean, almost none of the infomercials videos in the past have ever garnered that much attention. Is it because it's the weirdest of them all? Well, I'd argue it's very weird, but not really the weirdest. Though lots of people have said that this is quote-unquote the strangest thing Adult Swim has ever produced, but dude, have you seen unedited footage of a bear? That's literally one of my favorite things Adult Swim has ever produced for so many reasons, but we'll save that for another day. So why is it that this video went viral compared to everyone else? Well, let's point out the obvious real quick, that being, of course, the theme.
Too many cooks, too many cooks, too many cooks, too many cooks.
That song is a catchy motherfucker. It only proved to be more and more so as the video kept going on and changing styles multiple times. It's not surprising to hear that this part of the video was the most difficult to nail down. Like earworm shit, that takes serious skill to pull off. Catchy music like that can last in someone's mind for days, maybe even weeks if pulled off well, and it was pulled off extremely well. The other reason for this being more popular has to do with the familiarity of it. I think most of us have watched a sitcom in our life, whether it's something from the olden times of the 80s or 90s like Full House or Family Matters, which heavily inspired Too Many Cooks' opening, or if we're talking about newer sitcoms like, I don't know, Fuller House? What sitcoms do they show nowadays? Actually, quick side note, the reason I wanted to do Too Many Cooks was because I actually had this thought in my mind. I think the idea of Too Many Cooks is so special to so many people because it doesn't really exist anymore. Sitcoms, I mean. I mean, seriously, is anybody looking forward to a sitcom? They're kind of a dime a dozen sort of thing. I swear in the 2000s, there was a point where they were coming out with sitcoms pretty much every single month. None of them really provided anything special or even was anything new or cool. It's just the same old, same old. And that's sort of what's reflective of Too Many Cooks. It's that historical value that sitcoms sort of have in TV history, but it's been the same for 80 years now. It's a familiar thing that we've all watched and experienced together, and we can all find some sort of nostalgia with it. Hell, even if you're not into sitcoms, it's straight up parodies like everything. It's like a celebration of television as a whole, but also a scathing remark on its repetitive nature and formulaic approach that has never really changed, like I said, since about the 40s. And then there's that main reason I think most of us love this short, and that being the story. It is fascinating what is happening in this short. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's got the hallmarks of a weird, surreal Adult Swim short, sure, but it's got a narrative that can be followed. Going back to unedited footage of a bear, which I love a ton, one can't help but acknowledge just how fucking off the rails and confusing it gets. It's extremely experimental, and even when analyzing it closer and talking about all the nuances, you still end up really none the wiser, because short films like these aren't meant to really be solved, but to be questioned. It's up to you what happened. On the other hand, people have not only questioned Too Many Cooks, but people were obsessed with theory crafting the shit out of this whole thing. And let's be honest, making up theories and things that have somewhat tangible threads of narration is very exciting and very engaging. This sort of stuff can build communities and have you talking for days and days about what this, that, or the third could mean. Whoa, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. That's exactly how online horror works. It's the same formula that fuels these sorts of things. Your curiosity plus interest plus narrative plus some weird shit equals an instant hit. And what a hit it was. And yes, me personally, of course I theory crafted this myself. And my own opinion, honestly, is probably different than yours on what exactly happened. For me, I've always viewed this as sort of a commentary on how really brutal the television scene is. How anything can be axed pretty much at the drop of a hat. If your show isn't as successful as the producers thought, then they'll just cancel it out of nowhere. Sure, they might have you renew a few seasons here and there, but who knows if they'll give you the right budget for that season? Who knows if they really even have faith in you anymore? Maybe they might even sabotage it by introducing a new side character like Smarf, who really nobody asked for. It's characters like these, and it's intrusions like these, I should say, that really kill off these sorts of creative projects very soon. And then, when they don't work out, they do something wild. They do something quote-unquote new, but really, it's just copying something else that already exists. I view the people who are afraid of this character, who I think really is representative of producers or people who manage your projects, as more like employees that might lose their job. People who were pretty much already underpaid while working, but now they're just gonna be jobless after this. Who knows really if they'll even find success after this project is done. It's sort of reflective of nowadays, where writers have been on strike for over 100 days this year. Now, thankfully, the writer's strike was proven to be successful as they finally settled their negotiations and are finally getting the treatment that they deserve. But man, that is several years, decades even, of writers just not being treated well, and even actors too. A lot of shady shit happens in the background of Hollywood that people don't really talk about, and people still don't talk about. They're afraid of talking about it because the power dynamic is crazy. You can't just say something and expect not to face repercussions nowadays. And even if that's not necessarily what Too Many Cooks is about, I mean, let's be real, I think they only made it just to be funny and not really to be taken apart and analyzed and scrutinized like bit by bit. But this still spoke to a lot of people, and that's why so many people made their own theories on it. And that's why it's so fun to come up with them, because honestly, everyone's opinion on it is different than yours. And that's pretty cool. I don't even know if people remember this, but Too Many Cooks wasn't uploaded first by Adult Swim. Actually, that came out about a few weeks after it was aired on TV. It actually went viral from a completely different channel who uploaded it pretty much the same day it was shown. Adult Swim took note and, well, uploaded it on their channel, where it gained even more traction. It influenced the masses and really took the world by storm. Tons of people have been influenced by this short alone, even famous directors. It was a gateway for many people who weren't into surrealistic art to finally get their feet wet into something new, something odd, and yet something familiar all the same. Now, this isn't the end, of course, of Casper Kelly's career. While he's given no hints into making a sequel for the short, he has gone ahead and made another short called Final Deployment 4, Queen Battle Walkthrough, which you should check out if you liked his work. As for Adult Swim itself, they've been making weird experimental stuff for years now, so if you're interested in seeing that kind of content, you absolutely can. Just watch any of their previous infomercial shorts and you'll see exactly what I mean. In the end, this ended up being one of Adult Swim's largest success stories, and it shows the strengths of what makes Adult Swim so unique and so fun to watch. They embrace ideas that would otherwise never really flourish outside of their channel, and creativity like this is sparse because of that mindset of embracing familiarity instead of celebrating creativity. So keep an eye out for other projects like Too Many Cooks, because I assure you, there's plenty more out there that remains undiscovered.
Aoni is a... What the fuck? That intro sucked. Aoni, like I fucking... Aoni is a Japanese horror game made by one developer, no props. It's a game that released in 2008 in sort of a new wave of indie games that were being produced by Japanese indie devs. It immediately garnered attention by the West when a slew of early YouTube content creators began playing the game itself and posting their reactions on YouTube. It was a hit instantly for not only people watching the games, but anyone who decided to play it themselves, and of course it was free to play. Though you probably wouldn't know it just by looking at it, it did have a lot of people scared for their lives when they first started playing the game, and honestly, looking back on it, the game is shockingly simple. Like, no joke, there's no real story to speak of, just a bunch of school kids find a haunted house and dare themselves to go in, then they get locked inside, and then they're gone, and now you have to look for them. There is some side content here and there with this bizarre South Park Easter egg and this other Easter egg that features the fan translator, but other than that, it's really simple gameplay. It's just go here, go there, solve this puzzle, and move on. Very little story in between. It's not very deep, but I don't believe many things we cover here on Traumathon have to be so extensive. I think the fact that the very name Aoni just floods back a wealth of memories for so many is very representative of how impactful this game was, but you just can't get that feeling when you just watch people play it nowadays. It's sort of like one of those you had to be there moments. And yeah, you really did just have to be there at the time this game rose to popularity. Sort of like Slender Man. I think I bring up Slender Man every single friggin' year we do a Traumathon, but that just goes to show how incredibly important the character and his lore is not just to me, but everyone who grew up with online horror. Despite this, I know he's not just as big as he used to be, and that's due to the fact that his popularity is just a freeze frame of something larger during the early 2010s when he originally rose. Similarly here, the blue demon from Aoni, which I mean that's what Aoni literally translates to, is such a horrifying sight to us who grew up with it, but to those who didn't, well, he might be a little funky looking, huh? Like, he's a little weird, I don't know. He's surreal though, especially when paired with the main characters who are very anime-esque designs, and here we have this meme of a man just chasing you down like fucking Mr. X. Oh, and the music, by the way, or should I say the one string being played over and over again as he chases you. Is pretty fucking freaky, especially since he's so goddamn fast for a guy his size. It reminds me of the Psycho theme too, which is dreadful all on its own. Deeper into the game, you'll eventually come to this room where you see multiple Aonis, and it's like, okay, I remember seeing this first when I saw PewDiePie play this game, and I remember thinking that it was funny to look at, but scary and unnerving in a way. Does that make sense? I just think it's so surreal that we're being haunted by this uncanny and freaky looking demon creature, and yet here's a dozen of them lifting weights and being all around weird. I don't know, it just gives me the creeps. It's like if you saw a dozen Michael Myers at a gym, one of them is lifting weights, the other's watching TV, and others looking up hentai in his laptop. It's a funny image, no doubt, but something about it is creepy nonetheless. At any rate, Aoni later received updates, not only by the original creator, but by several fans as well, and I'm not going to get too deep into those, as I feel the changes ultimately do a disservice to the original vibes of Aoni, and there's just so many different updates made by so many different people that it's just kind of hard to determine which one's which, and it just gets sloppy. Either way, this showed just how big the game got, that fans were making their own versions, in fact their own spin-offs of the entire game, some arguably even better than the original, which helps because, well, like I said, the original is very simple, to put it nicely. I mean, the story's barely there, and the gameplay ain't much to write home about. I do like this one part where a character who you thought was dead comes back and is part of your party now, only for you to look into your party screen and oh shit, he's an Aoni, and that's kinda cool, and it adds so much to the story by showing instead of telling. But yeah, other than that, there's not much to the story at all.
However, I would be remiss if I just didn't mention the puzzles, which are pretty good and pretty hard. Some of them are actually very cleverly well done, and once you actually find them out and figure out the solution to them, they're really, really satisfying. Although the puzzles are somewhat of a double-edged sword, as some of them are just super obscure and really, really difficult to the point where a lot of players complain that they're just not fair or just frustrating to solve.
Despite this, thanks to the exposure it garnered from various different sources, not just YouTube, mind you, it came from Nico Nico as well, it had a meteoric rise that eventually made it into a big budget movie, which I heard fucking sucks. But hey, it's a movie nonetheless. Did Yume Nikki have a movie? No? Yeah, well that's what I thought, punk. Also, the rights to this game have been sold from the original creator No Props to a Japanese mangaka, Kenji Kuroda, who has since released 5 light novels based on the game. Ever since then, however, the Aoni craze actually died down faster than any other indie horror game of that era, at least from my frame of reference anyways. I see more people talking about Yume Nikki than I do hear them talk about Aoni. It did seem like sort of a blip, didn't it? Like with Yume Nikki's case, I remember even years after its initial popularity, there was still people playing the game and talking about the game more than Aoni, and I wonder why that is. Well, I guess it just goes to show that sometimes certain pieces of media just last longer than others. But this should never mean that the impact of those long forgotten pieces of horror are dull. They're just hidden now. And as always, it's up to you to keep these precious forgotten pieces of media close to your hearts. Because in the end, we remaining few are often all that's left of a certain horror franchise's legacy.
Okay, wait. Do I really need to talk about it? Okay. So, Aoni has an anime. And it's really fucking weird. It's really stupid. It's confusing. And also, there's the other one too. I don't really count that, but this one it's got cool deaths. It's really all I could say about it. But the one thing I really didn't want to talk about, but I have to because it's Aoni related. There's a fucking mobile game. Yes, I'm serious. There's a mobile game, and it is just about as shitty as you think it is. It has some really cool Oni designs, sure, but the other things that are making up this game, there is gacha elements. I mean, really? Why? Why? And how much of this game can you really just play for that long? Is it like, what there's, why would you put gacha in Aoni? So, am I wrong? Is this actually super popular, but just like in Japan only? Because I've never heard shit about this game until like, you know, when I had to do research for this video, and I found out there's 2 Aoni sequels. Really? Why? That are all mobile games. They're all the same, by the way. Just more gacha shit. What in the fuck? Anyways, that's it. I don't have much to add. Stupid. It's not often we cover literature here on Traumathon. Most of the times that we do, we sort of just talk more about the media spawned by it or the illustrations in the book than the actual content itself. This time, we're talking about almost everything involving the Anarchist Cookbook, which, in my opinion and in many others, is possibly the stupidest piece of literature out there. And yet, people gobbled it up and treated it as if it were gospel and like the most dangerous thing ever. That's not to say that it's not dangerous, it's just really stupid. Now, what is the Anarchist Cookbook? Well, it's essentially a little old recipe made by a young teenage punk by the name of William Powell, who created it to fight against the man, yo, and fascism and all that other punk rock shit that dumbass teens don't really know much about. Though, that's not to dismiss the symbolic nature of what this book stands for, especially at the time that it was made. It was made around the height of the Vietnam War, back when the tension between Americans and their government was at an all-time high. The average nuclear family went from trusting their politicians and obeying their president to just outright questioning their rights and wondering why they do what they do. It was right after the Civil Rights Movement, and during then, the new hippie movement, which stood for peace and love, yo, and doing whatever the fuck you want and not letting the man, i.e. the government, dictate what you do as a citizen of the earth. This era in American history was called the counterculture era. And with this came the rise of anarchy and more anarchist-adjacent ideologies. And so came the Anarchist Cookbook, a direct response to the incompetence of the American government at the time, made by the aforementioned plucky teen that has all your favorite kinds of recipes like how to make TNT, instructions on how to make LSD, how to sabotage a railroad, how to make traps. What kind of traps? Fucking, I think all of them actually. Book traps, door traps, handle traps, loose floorboard traps, pipe traps, whistle traps, ballpoint pen traps, pressure release. Fuck it, you get it. Ooh, fun. How to make a Molotov cocktail and a grenade? Hey, it's a bit of a sort of his and her kind of date night idea, huh? Double trouble on the mayhem, baby. How to grow marijuana. How to make your own guns. Pipe traps, car traps, fucking more traps? What is with this shit? What is a lamp trap? Guerrilla training, electronic bugging devices, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. This whole thing was designed with pretty much assholes in mind, and assholes there sure were. This book is directly linked to several murderers and terrorists alike. It's kind of crazy just how far this traveled. And so was it any surprise that this book got banned in many countries and is considered highly illegal? Well, actually, that country thing is not totally true, it's just Australia. But anyways, it's really no wonder that it's just kind of super illegal in some places, but at the same time, if you want to copy yourself, these books are still available, and pretty easily available too. It's not like you gotta go to an underground salesman or anything like that. It's pretty much everywhere. Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, anybody can buy it there. It's a PDF too. A PDF you can easily just find just by Googling it up. It's really not that hard to find. And honestly, Amazon, if you just want to buy it, yeah, you can go for it. That's super anarchist, right? Just buying shit on Amazon. Hey man, power to the people and all that and whatever. Anyways, I don't condone actually looking up the PDF and having it for free, but hey, that is, I guess that's true to the book, the rad anarchist way to get some free material, dog. But before we really hunker down and just start reading this book in all its glory and start chucking TNT at our neighbors and junk, there are some interesting ironies you should probably learn first. First off, the writer of this book went from straight up punk anarchist to born again Christian in literally 5 years. What a turnaround, am I right? And immediately after that, he tried his best to backpedal away from the book and his involvement with it entirely, even trying to get the publisher Barricade Books to just stop publishing it. Thing is, by this point, the book had already sold 2 million copies, and that means lots of money. And that also means not giving a fuck about what some punk kid has to say with his widow feelings about this being wrong or morally damaging to the American people. Aw, well yeah, you can be an anarchist all day long. That don't mean you're impervious to the laws of copyright, motherfucker. Gotta love America. Now, give some credit to William Powell. This book is pretty dangerous, and he has gone out of his way to, try to take it down, and he's really not that bad of a person at all. I truly don't want to paint Mr. Powell as being some lame dude wanting to get rid of this book. He had legitimate gripes and worries for people who read the book, and though it might be tied to his religion, I don't blame him for wanting to get rid of it. Let's actually get into the meat of this book. First and foremost, this book did not literally kill over 150 people, as the title suggests. I mean, like, nobody went around and started assaulting people with this book and murdering them with it. I mean, shit, I don't even think it's that heavy to really kill a small rodent, I think. However, it is worth noting that this book has been linked to several kinds of malefactors, ranging from serial killers to mass shooters, even terrorists, both foreign and domestic. Many have linked their involvement to their crimes to this one book, and though it never specifically has been targeted as their main cause or the main reason why they went out to do the atrocities that they did, it has been at least mentioned to be in their possession. Of course, does this mean this book is actually dangerous? Does it have power to cause mass terrorism? Well, no, obviously not. That's about as stupid as blaming Doom or Call of Duty with mass shootings. The fact of the matter is, this book is a failure of information. It doesn't do anything at all that any experts or amateurs alike can claim to be even potentially dangerous. The research for this book was completed in 4 months in a local library. Picture that. 4 fucking months, written by an angsty teen in his local suburban area. Like, he's not going to get government secrets or actual tips and tricks on how to blow up people. This isn't expert advice for shit, and quite frankly, a lot of this is just made up or incorrect, possibly outdated, or just bad advice in general, and yet people still buy this book for whatever reason. It could be the novelty of having a quirky little book that has potentially dangerous ingredients in it. Maybe some people really are curious, or let's just get straight to it, some people are just really genuinely stupid and think they can really make illegal drugs with this. But that didn't stop anyone from making their own epic, betterer version of the Anarchist Cookbook, with this book unofficially spawning several sequels and spin-offs. Yes, seriously, people wrote their own version of the cookbook, most famously the Anarchist Cookbook 4. What happened to 2 and 3? They don't exist. Or maybe it's pronounced the Anarchist Cookbook IV. I don't know, it's anarchy, and it was found online, easily for anyone to just look up and get. But these don't have anything to do with the original, though in spirit they have many wacky ingredients and instructions that are pretty much borderline illegal. In fact, this whole book is illegal in Australia, as mentioned before, and though many governments have demanded this book to be banned, this book is still largely available to purchase in many places, as stated previously. Though that doesn't stop some courts of laws to convict people who are in possession of this book, such as the case with Ben John, a 21-year-old who was sentenced to jail for possession of a PDF of the book for suspicion of terrorist acts. He was sentenced to 2 years in jail. So, as quote-unquote dangerous as this book is, it's kind of hard to find people who even care about it nowadays. It's more of a quirky little relic that most people slightly remember as being that weird thing some people, especially weirdos, used to read. Or maybe you remember it as the movie. Remember the Anarchist Cookbook movie? That was totally tubular, dude. Let me tell ya, the 40-year-olds who came up with this script for young hippie anarchist edgy teens, man, they really got all the shit down, yo. In the end, the Anarchist Cookbook and its author will remain notorious forever, and sadly, the author himself will see no real redemption as he's passed away in 2016 at the age of 66. And since then, there have still been many people who've purchased it and have made headlines with crimes that they've committed, and the media never fails to mention that one infamous book that they had in possession. That one book that, for many, will remain as the most dangerous book ever written. At this point, I think we all know that the Grinch is the motherfucker of all cartoons, and by this I mean he is the most recognized jerk in all of cartoon media. There's no denying it. I remember watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas as a little bean several times throughout my childhood, whether it was because it was on TV or because my teacher was just playing it for the class during those final days of December. You know, that sort of like chill rut right after the exams and tests, just like a few days before winter break and a few days after all that homework was done. There's that weird in-between lull where teachers, not really wanting to teach anymore since the semester's ending soon anyways, go ahead and just give their class some R&R and just watch some Christmas movies. And I'm not sure if this is still the same for kids nowadays, but I have a feeling even kids in elementary school this December will still get to see the Grinch on their under-budget CRTs. Or hey, maybe your school has a DVD player. Ooh, really fancy. And you'll instead get to watch the new Grinch. Or the other one that's new, but also very old Grinch. Either way, everyone loves, or at least knows about the Grinch. But few people ever really give him much attention for Halloween. I mean, why should they? It makes sense that The Grinch is a Christmas classic, so they should focus on him during Christmas, right? Well, of course, but everyone always overlooks The Grinch, and I should say Dr. Seuss's attempt at making a Halloween classic when the ABC network released The Grinch Halloween special titled Halloween is Grinch Night. Yes, there was a Grinch Halloween special, and for some reason, it just sort of flew under everyone's radar, which is weird to think about, really. The Grinch is such an iconic Christmas figure. I mean, he's up there with Scrooge or Santa Claus himself. Even in the 70s, when this was produced, the Grinch was a household name. So, what happened? Well, Well, I'll be picking apart at the nuances that made the Grinch's Halloween special flop, as well as other interesting tidbits as we go along. So let's talk about the story itself. Halloween is a Grinch Night was a TV special, much like its predecessor, and aired on October 28, 1977, 11 years after How the Grinch Stole Christmas. The screenplay was in fact made by Dr. Seuss himself and directed by Gerard Baldwin, notable for his work on the Smurfs, Flintstones, Jetsons, and several other classics, but we'll touch on that later. Our story begins, I guess, in Whoville? I don't know. Wasn't Whoville like a sort of small speck on a snowflake? This is just like a reminder that life is ephemeral and it's forever going to fade away if you just don't cherish it enough. I don't know, whatever. It's a fantastical world full of fantastical... Yeah, I'm not really huge of a fan of this whole autumn vibes here. Not that I don't like autumn vibes in general. It's just that, comparing it to like the Christmas special, which was just full of colors and music, here we get like a gold opportunity to show the red and brown earth tones and the nice vibrant colors that come along with the fall weather, but really, it's nothing. Actually, the entire color palette is just kind of boring. Fall vibes are all of that, and a bag of chips, that nice, crisp, warm color that can still pass off as cold. It's a neat little palette that's comforting to look at. This is just boring, like really. That's not to say that the new art style is bad. Many of the visuals are very effectively spooky, sometimes even scary. It just gives off a very in-your-face, horrifying vibe that you see a lot in Halloween movies. But in this case, it doesn't really overstay its welcome. It's just surrounded by blandness. That is pretty much the one highlight of this entire... That was my fucking cup. That is the one highlight of this entire film, but first you have to suffer through some mediocrity. The whole film's premise is all about the Halloween season, and as soon as the Whovilles smell gamer girl feet in the air, they decide, oh shit, it's Grinch time, and they begin to sing about how fucked up the Grinch gets during this time of year. Halloween, but they don't really call it Halloween. I think they do. I don't really remember. The songs are just not great. It's really quite the opposite reaction to the festive moods of Christmas. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the vibes of Halloween being all spooky and scary and dark and grim, but the Who's actively do not like Halloween at all. They don't even celebrate it. It's just, they're fearful of it. Jeez, talk about bias, you fucking Who's. Show Halloween some love. Damn, dude. Well, I guess it's hard to love a holiday that the Grinch is actively involved in, since the Who's view him as a domestic terrorist. They even have their own hotline and everything. So what does the Grinch do to terrorize the town? Fucking nothing. Like, nothing at all. He chases like a gay pink thing, and I don't know. I guess he scares this bitch, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like, he doesn't really do anything harmful. In fact, I don't even really think he gets to Whoville. Like I think that's the end of it when he scares this one kid. Okay. I don't know what really the point of this story is. Is it like that Halloween is bad, or that being scared can be fun? Well, if that's the case, why do we hate the Grinch? Why does the Grinch get punished so hard? I mean, he's left alone at the end of this fucking short. The Christmas special taught us that even the most sour people in the world can change as long as they are given a new perspective, as long as they're shown love. This sort of like, I don't know, yeah, Dr. Seuss allegedly wrote this, but it doesn't sound like him at all if you hear any of the rhymes or the writing in general. It's very lazily done, and the rhymes just suck. Like I said, the music is all real bad, like real bad.
I wouldn't go out on a night like this for $1.50.
It's bafflingly bad. The one segment where the kid gets all spooked, I mean, I truly love the visuals a ton, and it's really well done. The music's alright, but man, everything around this is just a drag, and that's sort of why it failed. It just wasn't a charming special. It barely had any spirit, and you can tell no one really wanted to make this, at least from what you can see. And let's not forget the animation. It is a noticeable dip in quality when compared to The Grinch Stole Christmas. There's a notable reason for that. Unlike The Grinch Stole Christmas, Halloween is Grinch Night was not directed by Chuck Jones, but instead Gerard Baldwin. I'm sure most of you know who Chuck Jones is. The man barely needs an introduction, as he's considered a legend amongst fans of all old Warner Brothers cartoons. Much of his energy and pacing that made Looney Tunes fluid and comedic translated over to How the Grinch Stole Christmas, making it appealing for years to come. But that's not to knock down Gerard Baldwin's career, however, as he too is a reputable man who's had his fingers in several classic animations. Mr. Magoo, The Flintstones, Jetsons, Tiny Toons Adventure, Garfield, and was even a supervising producer for Robot Boy. A little tidbit for the 7 to 8 Robot Boy fans that still exist out there, I guess. So, while Baldwin's career isn't anything to scoff at, the difference in quality in animation is noticeable, and I hesitate to say it looks a lot cheaper. And this probably has to do with the fact that, yeah, it probably was cheaper. The original Grinch special had a budget of over $300,000. A sizable budget for sure, especially for a TV special. It's 1/5 the budget Snow White, and when it first released, I'm willing to bet that the Halloween special didn't net as big of a budget. I think the producers thought, you know, it's the Grinch. Why would we spend so much money on one of the biggest Christmas names ever? It'll soar by itself on reputation alone. Sadly, it didn't, and remains one of the weirdest and most forgotten Halloween specials out there. And before you start wondering, no, it's not lost media. Anybody can buy an HD remaster of the Halloween Grinch special now, and you can definitely look it up on YouTube as well. They re-released it in a bundle several times, and just recently included it in the HD remaster alongside How the Grinch Stole Christmas Ultimate Edition, just 5 years ago. Yet, even as the short gets re-released, there's honestly high doubts it'll ever catch on as a Halloween favorite amongst kids these days. There's really just no pizzazz to it, no wonder, no catchy songs, just real dry, kind of a mess, somewhat confusing, really boring, and just a likely rushed product overall. So, if that's the case, if it's not even that memorable, if it's not even that creepy, why am I even talking about this if it ain't that good? Well, for starters, not everything in Traumathon is fondly remembered, or even good for that matter. But even so, I know that this lives in many people's memories as that quirky thing that they saw once or twice as a kid, so I do it mostly for them. Secondly, a Grinch Halloween special? I think most of us barely even knew that was a thing, so that's just interesting trivia in itself. But the main reason I really want to talk about this is because fucking Christmas is way too fucking intrusive on Halloween, goddammit. Why the fuck did I go to my local Target the other day and I just started hearing Mariah Carey as I was going through the Halloween decorations? Leave me the fuck alone. I hate this shit. What? Wait, your fucking turn. It's so awful. I hate that it's so obstructive that fucking Thanksgiving has been completely erased from people's minds. Like, does anyone talk about Thanksgiving anymore? I swear people don't even know that it exists anymore. People don't know, like the days off for Thanksgiving has been reduced. I swear to God, because of Christmas. Like I have friends, right? College friends, and every year we plan to do something together. Like they always say, oh, well, vacation doesn't start until like Thursday. I'm like, Thursday? Fucking, that's when Thanksgiving starts. Dude, how the fuck? This is what happens when a holiday takes over your fucking holiday. And now what's next, huh? Like, what's next? Is it Halloween? Are we just gonna fucking all dress up like Santa Claus next year? Are we gonna like have spooky parties anymore? Like, it's just gonna be like, I don't know, fucking secret spooky Santa. Like, fuck it. Like, let's just give up. Seriously, I'm fucking done with everything. Just fuck you, fuck everything. And we're back. Hopefully y'all didn't wait too long for this video, but as promised, we're taking a look at what I call television entities. I know I said that I promised another video like this pretty much last year, but never got around to it, but hey, now we're here, so fuck off. So what are television entities? Well, I assume most of us watched TV growing up, and hell, I reckon most of you are the last generation to actually watch TV, as we get ever so closer to the streaming age being the absolute only way to get entertainment. But for the rest of us, television holds a very special place in our hearts and minds. The thing is though, television being the way it is, you know, live and whatnot, has sometimes proven to hold some of the strangest events in human history. Well, that might be hyperbolic, but still, it's freaky nonetheless. These events are what I call television entities. Ooh. Now, what exactly counts as a television entity? Well, it's pretty much anything that lies outside of the media, really. So, no commercials, no TV shows, or anything like that. Sort of that other stuff that exists outside the parameters. Stuff like the emergency alert system, which I made a video of.
television intrusions, sign-offs, etc. There are really so many of these that I won't be covering literally everything. Maybe someday we can come back to this topic in depth at a later time or a later Traumathon, but for now, I wanted to focus on the usual suspects, or maybe in this case, the unusual suspects. And just FYI, I won't be focusing on PSAs today, mainly because that's been a highly requested entry for Traumathon since forever now, but we'll cover that someday, don't worry. But if there are any particular PSAs that are in themselves super strange, then I'll cover those right here, starting with the most infamous PSAs in the world that you really don't see too much nowadays: missing persons. Yes, this sort of stuff is even past my time, honestly. See, back before the internet and cell phones and such, spreading information was a lot more limited. When people went missing, people more commonly used posters and such, much like today, sure, but nowadays it's easier to just spread that info online, and it's way faster too, and it gets more eyes, as opposed to just locals. But there was an alternative way that potentially could have helped more than just posters spread across the community, and that was through local television.
Hundreds of children go missing each year in Canada. Confronting this frightening phenomenon is Child Find, an agency dedicated to finding our lost ones. There is no border to stop the search, and no place too small to look.
Yeah, imagine watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and after the episode was done, you saw this shit. It's kinda unnerving, in my opinion anyways. Now, like I said, I didn't really grow up with this stuff. Well, not entirely, but I'll get to that in a bit. And I'd reckon most of you didn't. Still, some people have, and I imagine it's not necessarily the best thing a child could see. It's sort of a creepy thing, really, just thinking about it even now. I mean, most of these are from 40 or so years ago, and many of these people might still be missing, or worse, dead. We can take some solace that some of these people have been found, but let's be realistic here. 600,000 people go missing annually, and out of those 600,000, only a small fraction of them are acknowledged to be missing. And by that I mean most of you will likely never see a missing persons poster of most of those people, or even realize that most of them are missing. And let's not forget that an even smaller portion of people get their stories blown up by the media, and seeing as how the media tends to play favorites as to who they cover, i.e. beautiful young people, out of those 600,000 people that go missing, many of them remain undiscovered pretty much forever. Most bodies are just never found. People are never found. Then you see this, a stark reminder of how people just vanish, no longer to be seen by anyone. Some of these people are just children. Now, granted, most kids probably didn't see these little missing persons PSAs, as they were more likely to show these during the night, but they do in fact show these during prime time. And that's the time when they show family-friendly shows. And so we get kind of insensitive moments like this.
Missing Colleen Osborne, now age 16, last seen Daytona Beach, Florida, March 15th, 1984. Call 800-843-5678.
We now return to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Wow. Hey Timmy, hope you enjoy fucking Rudolph after being reminded that you could be snatched up and murdered like this chick right here. She was motherfucking 16 years old. No older than you, Tim boy. Enjoy your fucking movie. But even among these sorts of PSAs, there are some that really stand out for being a bit different. And one of the creepiest ones I personally saw, not in real life of course, were the Canal 5 Missing Persons PSA. Take a look.
Pedimos ayuda para localizar a Víctor Gama Tavera, de 20 años de edad. Se ignora su paradero desde el 28 de mayo del año 2000. Esteban Mendoza Juárez, de 24 años, se ignora su paradero.
Now, Mexico has always had an issue with missing people, for a variety of reasons, really. So, these kinds of PSAs were very frequent, especially in Canal 5. Though, of course, the most famous of these PSAs was the one involving Selene Delgado Lopez. I really can't explain to you why Selene's photo is so popular, but it probably has something to do with this sort of creepypasta slash meme thing that has been spread throughout Latin America, where it's pretty much the same footage, but with creepy overlaid photos and some slight jump scare sounds. This photo, by the way, is actually Derek Todd Lee. Not the real dude, just a police sketch of what Lee was interpreted to look like from eyewitness reports. Lee, of course, being known infamously as the Baton Rouge Killer. Imagine that. Seriously. Being a missing woman, probably dead somewhere, and having people 30 to 40 something years later compare you to a real-life serial killer because your photo just happened to be that creepy. What a great legacy to leave behind. Of course, some people also mention the creepy photo of Manuel Rosas, which, to be fair, is just nothing. Like, really, it's just a vague shape of a head surrounded or possibly emitting light. These black and white photos are especially jarring when you consider other photos shown in this one particular commercial are pretty much all in color. Still, we can't just blame the photos themselves. I mean, it's just the whole vibe, really. Again, it's just eerie to think about how most of these people were most likely never found, or that they may have been found, but just as a corpse. And I don't know which is worse. Coming back to America, though, one of the most famous of these PSAs would happen to be the ones that involved Joanna Lopez, an infamous little missing persons PSA, and possibly one of the worst. And by worst, I mean, well, we'll talk about it in a bit, but just take a look. So not only is it scary, but it's almost, no, it's not even almost, it totally is insensitive. I mean, that's it. There's no voice to tell you who this is. There's no additional info, where she was last seen, when she was missing, age, height, nothing. Just Joanna Lopez with a terrible, grainy, washed out photo. And keep in mind, this was a long time ago when CRTs weren't really the best quality, and it was really late at night. It's a sign-off, meaning it's the last program of the night. Most people by now would have turned off their TV. It's hard to say really why it was so half-assed, or if this TV station did the same to their other missing persons, but many have attributed this PSA to just how missing person minorities are treated, or more accurately, mishandled. It's just how it's been, unfortunately. But speaking of sign-offs, hey, that's a weird thing, ain't it? We talked briefly about sign-offs and the lonely feeling you get when the static stays on but nothing accompanies it whatsoever. Check out that video here, by the way. But what about around the world? What kind of sign-offs can we expect from international TV?
A partir de este momento, finaliza el horario de protección al menor. La presencia de los mismos frente al televisor es responsabilidad absoluta de los señores padres.
Wow, that fucking sucks. Thanks, Argentina. Well, if you don't know, or maybe you do, Argentina has a pretty wholesome, or maybe I should say attempted wholesome little message about taking care of your children, and that what they consume on television is up to the responsible adults, aka the parents that they live with, or the guardians. This whole shit is actually so disturbing that I couldn't even believe it to be real. I genuinely thought that this was some sort of analog horror mock-up, especially with this split frame image that just happens to be there, but no, it's real. The lack of colors is likely due to a television error or recording error, and this image likely appears for more than just a split second. But still, the distorted laughing, the single image, the creepy fact that broadcasting stops as soon as this message stops, it's all just horrible vibes, genuinely. So let's settle down with something maybe not so creepy. This is the sign-off for the broadcasting network. I'm going to say this wrong. Televisão Público de Angola. From the country of, well,
Angola. And for many, this sign-off is debatably creepy. Some people thought it was very calming, while many others thought, wow, that's fucking weird. Either way, it doesn't really compare to, say, Australia or Hong Kong's super fucking weird sign-offs. Why these two in particular? Well, take a look. Wow, okay. Well, anyways, here's Hong Kong.
Channel operated by Television Broadcasts Limited, closing down transmission for the night.
Man. Okay. Well, I'm not a native to either of these locations, but what the fuck, seriously? Can someone actually tell me why these two countries are obligated to show the Queen during sign-offs? I especially love that Hong Kong, I mean, this was during the UK's rule over Hong Kong, so this really rubs it in the face of every citizen of Hong Kong at the time that, bitch, you belong to us, and we're gonna remind you every single fucking night. But how about this though? This is VPRO, a liberal Protestant channel from the Netherlands, and it has some probably the most surreal bumpers I've ever seen from any channel around the world. Check a look.
Als u het één avond per week eens anders wilt zien dan u het gewend bent te zien, dan moet u wel laten merken dat u dat wilt. Bel daarom een van de volgende nummers en neem het VPRO-lidmaatschap erbij. Doe het nu, voordat de wet van de grote getallen gaat vertellen dat iedereen maar hetzelfde moet willen.
Shout out to Adam Martin for having this compilation of clips at their highest quality. Yeah, so, I mean, fuck. What do I say to any of this shit? The melting one is probably the first encounter of this cursed channel I've had, and it's really, really bad. I mean, is that moaning I hear? Is it like ejaculating? I don't get it. I'm really not trying to be crass, by the way. I just mean, not totally, but what is this supposed to mean? And secondly, this one? I mean, what the fuck? Why is this so bad? There's also a mouth one that was also pretty bad. It's just straight up horror, man. But let's move on from sign-offs to broadcast intrusions, aka hijacked signals. Now, when it comes to broadcast hijackings, there's loads of them that exist, but unfortunately, as fascinating as these topics are, most of them are completely made up, or most of them aren't captured on TV, surprisingly enough, or they're just not really too interesting to totally cover. I know that Captain Midnight is something a lot of people like talking about, but it's really not that big of a deal. In many cases, they're just as tamed as this one, or sometimes really politically active, and I just don't want to get too into that. So instead,
I'll talk about a few broadcast hijackings that are my personal favorites just because they're really creepy, or because they're really interesting, or because they have some weird backstory to them. The zombie hijacking I already covered in my EAS video, by the way, and the Wyoming incident, I know a lot of people are probably going to bring that up. Don't worry, we'll cover it in a separate video. First, there's the infamous Max Headroom incident, in which someone or a group of people interrupted the broadcast of WGN-TV and WTTW, two local Chicago stations, for seemingly no good reason to be hacked, honestly. Like, these dudes straight up hacked the channel on 3 separate occasions. Well, both of these channels, I should say. The first seemed like it didn't really go too well, as the voice of Max Headroom was completely muffled and unintelligible. The second was much longer, probably because it was during an airing of Doctor Who late at night, and honestly, who gives a shit about old school Doctor Who? So the intrusion lasted for 1.5 minutes before being cut off. In this full version, we see a dude wearing a Max Headroom mask talking about the station's broadcasters, talking about Clutch Cargo or something, having a dildo as his middle finger. Did you notice that, by the way? I didn't notice that until I rewatched this. Flipping off the camera and having his asshole spanked. Rad. Now, it's unclear exactly how the perpetrators did this, as well as who and why, but speculation ranges from disgruntled employees to weird college kids pranking the station, and likely this was all broadcasted in a van nearby the 2 stations. And though at the time they had faced upwards to $10,000 in charges and a year in jail, thanks to the statute of limitations, if these guys came out now and admitted they did it, they'd be completely free to do so without getting charged. And yet, nobody to this day has been revealed. Speaking of being unrevealed, let's talk about the less talked about intrusion made by the Ashtar Galactic Command, most notably by its representative, Vrillin. Now, here's a small snippet of the intrusion as it was possibly seen back then. I'll explain what I mean by that, but just keep in mind, this is a very, very long intrusion. So this is just a fraction of what might have happened. Take a look.
We speak to you now to send us theme as we have done to your brothers and sisters all over this, your planet Earth. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world, so that you may communicate to your fellow beings the course you must take to avoid the disaster which threatens your world and the beings on other worlds around you. This is in order that you may share in the great awakening as the planet passes into the new age of Aquarius. This is our message.
I really appreciate.
So right off the bat, let's talk about the elephant in the room. This audio is likely not the audio first heard when the channel was hacked at the time. In fact, it's just a recreation of what just happened. The true audio back then is most likely lost to time and remains lost media to this day. There's no video of the incident ever happening either, but various reports do confirm that it did in fact happen. These various reports also claim that Vrillin isn't even the correct name, meaning much of this entire transcript is unreliable and possibly incorrect in many ways we just can't even pinpoint. Not like we could have pinpointed the perp either, because unfortunately this all sort of crumbles from here. Nobody knows who did it, though the authorities had claimed that whoever did do this has a considerable amount of technical know-how, which, okay, sure, but at the same time, that seems almost contradictory because, well, the station at the time was using a pretty funky broadcasting tower that made it super easy to hijack at the moment. So was it really done by some smarty pants who were from a local college or something? Or just someone who knew just enough? Either way, the purpose of this broadcast intrusion remains unsolved to this very day, and hey, there's a likely chance it could have been aliens. Or not. Because apparently this is what they look like, and I don't think that's Vrillin. Is that him? That's not him. Now, as we travel to Europe, specifically the Czech Republic, we see another hijacking that was very divisive despite what the hijacking portrayed. Take a look. See that? Well, I mean, of course you did. It's a nuclear fucking bomb that just exploded in the middle of the grassy knolls of... Wow, I'm not going to pronounce that, or even try. Now, obviously, a nuke did not just randomly go off in the Czech Republic for no reason. This was actually just a hijacking that happened during the live airing of a show called Panorama, which is just a live stream of many peaceful locations in the Czech Republic, which I guess meant it was the perfect target for this really funny hoax. Or is it a hoax? Well, that's the actual argument for a long time, as the artists who committed this act pleaded that they were under their own artistic liberties to commit this prank. The prank, of course, being that they hijacked this channel just to show this CG recreation of what a nuclear bomb exploding in this town would look like. Essentially, they were saying that this was an act of art and not an act of misinformation. Therefore, it cannot be counted as a hoax or a deliberate lie to the people. Many citizens surprisingly agreed, and many actually enjoyed the prank itself. But there were also a ton who were really outraged by this prank, saying it was harming the tourism of that one region, as now people would start thinking it was unsafe or a nuclear wasteland. But in the end, the artists were given 200 hours of mandatory community service, a decision that also had people torn apart. There's actually a whole documentary on this that has English subtitles, so if any of you have the time and you're interested in seeing how this one innocuous prank split the nation apart, then I'd suggest watching it. It's kind of crazy actually just how much of this prank is just tied to politics and the history of Czech art. Really fascinating stuff. And lastly, the one hack that I genuinely think is pretty creepy, this one.
Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord. 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 Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord.
That is fucking weird. This incident occurred on the 7 Network channel in Australia back in 2007, and this audio clip played over and over again during the airing of the show Mayday for 6 minutes straight. As weird and creepy as that is, it doesn't really compare how the network executives responded, which in itself was pretty fucking weird. See, because the spokesperson for the 7 Network at the time stated that it wasn't a network hacking or hijacking, and that it was just a part of an original programming, which happened to just loop over and over again. It wasn't some sort of intrusion at all. They also stated that the clip didn't have the speaker saying, "Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord," but actually, "Jesus Christ, one of the Nazarenes," which is like,
Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord.
That doesn't sound like that at all. That is just a blatant lie on their part, but it gets even weirder because it turns out the clip is not from the show Mayday or any other original programming, but actually a news broadcasting clip of a news van in Iraq getting ambushed by opposing forces. I actually doubted this was the case for a long time, mainly because when this TV incident is talked about, people never really include what the clip was. But doing my own digging, I was actually able to find the video itself in which it came from. The video is titled Halliburton Ambush Iraq, and the timestamp is 2:07. Now, I can't show the video because it might be too much, as it is footage of a news van getting shot at in the middle of a war zone, but I can at least show you a bit more of the audio to prove its validity.
Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord. They ain't fired a shot.
So the origin of that sound has been solved, but not by the network itself. This was found by independent researchers, not hired by the network, and to this day, 7 Network has not acknowledged this finding at all, leaving it all up in the air as to what happened that one night they aired Mayday. My guess? I think they were hijacked for a moment. This seems way too deliberate of a message to just sort of be a coincidence, and from a random broadcasting of this news van getting attacked? No, it just seems too convenient. I think the network knows they were hacked, but don't want to admit it, either because it makes the network look bad, or because it might invite other pirate broadcasters to hack into their network, or both. Or maybe it was a political message that they knew about that they didn't want to acknowledge. Either way, we'll never really be sure if this was some freak accident or foul play, and we might never know, honestly. And so that concludes our look at television entities, many of which most of us have never seen. Most of us might even experience them for the first time in this video.
Now with television being part of a bygone era and everything switching to digital, we may never experience any of this anymore. So hopefully with this video, we preserve just a bit more of that history that we'd otherwise miss out on. And if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. So here's a short but sweet one. Scary Godmother, a television special airing back in 2003 on Cartoon Network based on the characters made by Jill Thompson. Yeah, lots of people probably don't know this, but Scary Godmother was in fact a kids book series for a while in the late 90s, 97 specifically, before it became a movie special. The art for the old books are actually quite beautiful and super cute. Like, really cute. And it surprisingly had a long run, with several books and comics featuring this cast of characters up until 2011. But aside from being a book, Jill Thompson wanted more for her characters, and so she pitched the idea of a TV special to Mainframe Studios, whose work you might recognize in TV shows such as Reboot, Beast Wars, Max Steel. Yeah, remember Max Steel? With this new project, they actually worked very closely with Thompson, as she was incredibly eager to bring her creations to life, and so she took the role of art director. She didn't just want a hyper-realistic 3D show, she wanted a more stylistic approach and to translate her watercolor style to 3D as closely as possible. If you look closely, lots of the backgrounds and 3D assets are actually watercolored and very meticulously handcrafted. Despite what you might think of the animation style now, sure, you can't deny that there was a lot of love put into it. Though you're totally valid in arguing that maybe this idea of a stylized watercolored 3D animation was a bit too ahead of its time, especially since the team only had about 8 months to work on this. 8 friggin' months for a 48-minute special with new technology that they aren't used to, with like a team of mostly 15 or so people who were mostly there, which later changed to 50, sure, but that is a lot of weight put onto you for 8 months, jeez. But I'd rather not diminish the efforts of the crew, and especially not of Thompson herself, because more than just directing the art style of the special, she also co-wrote the special, drew character sheets, edited parts of the actual special itself, chose the voices, chose the music. She was involved in many ways, and that's just a small list of things that she did. She really loved this project, and it's to be admired. Even if the show has a very suffocating deadline, she made sure to carry her own weight and not just be someone who was just standing idly by. And that's not to say Thompson was the only one passionate about this project. The entirety of Mainframe was pretty much using this special as an opportunity to show off their new 3D software, as they were switching from their old software with this new entry. Not just to show off the new software limitations and the things that it can do, but also to prove to many people that not all 3D has to be movie quality in order to be successful. So they had something to prove. And yes, it looks rough now, but let's go easy on it for a bit. This is the 2000s and 3D software was nowhere near as intuitive as it is today. You could genuinely make a 3D short film on your phone with certain apps nowadays. The fact that they tried to innovate with techniques that hadn't been tried by the team before on new software is something worth admiring. But enough about the technicalities, let's talk about the film itself. Scary Godmother is a 48-minute Halloween special featuring who else? The Scary Godmother. But before that, we're introduced to a group of naughty young kids who want to go trick-or-treating, but they're forced to bring along Hannah, the cousin of Jimmy, one of the kids in the group. The older kids decided to pull a prank on her by locking her in this spooky little mansion, which they pull off successfully, but this activates Hannah's stand, the Scary Godmother. Scary Godmother is an eccentric witch that acts like any other godmother in any other fairy tale, being Hannah's guide and showing her to be more confident in herself. In this case, however, she tries to shake off her prejudice against scary monsters and helps her embrace her inner goth by showing her that spooky shit is dope as fuck. We're then introduced to Scully, the homosexual skeleton that literally, I'm not even joking, comes out of the closet when you first meet him. Harry the wolf, a thespian bottom. Seriously, the dude gets sissy hypnoed like twice. Like I can't say anything else to that. Count Max and Count Ruby, the token goth couple, and their kid. And Bugaboo, the rich friend, who, no joke, was based off of Thompson's fans. Apparently the voice of Bugaboo was even inspired by one particular fan of Thompson's who, quote, made creepy fan art, unquote. She didn't want to mention who in particular it was, as to not embarrass him,
but apparently he actually did get upset that she didn't mention him as the inspiration. That's funny. Weird, but funny. With that wacky cast out of the way, we get to know more about them. Hannah becomes more open, and in the end, she learns that everyone deserves a chance to be appreciated, and for spooky things to be embraced. The whole short is really just embracing the idea of not judging a book by its cover, embracing people for their different backgrounds, sexual orientations, and skin color. Sorry. It really is a wholesome, fun little movie with incredibly lame dad jokes that are charming, and the film has genuine spooky vibes with a wonderful Halloween overtone that really completes the whole look. Like I said, the animation is rough, but I think most people can look past it, especially understanding that the people behind this really gave it their all. Now, of course, there is a sequel, but I really just wanted to focus on the original, as that's the one film I've continuously been watching every single Halloween for, I guess, for nearly 20 years now. And I think this is the short that most people remember. Maybe someday I'll take more in-depth looks at both the creation of Scary Godmother in the comics and the 3D itself, the innovations it brought to the table in terms of 3D, and of course, the sequel. But for now, I just wanted to show more love to a Halloween classic that, while aged like a spoiled pumpkin, is still the pumpkin I fell in love with. Out of every Traumathon I've ever done, this year has seen the most submissions out of any of them, with over 250 emails that came my way this year, which is probably more than any other combined. Some of them overlap others, sure, and we'll talk about them soon enough, while few are unique to that individual. Because of such a surge of interest in seeing your own trauma being featured in this year's Traumathon, I'd figured the annual user suggestions episode I do every year is going to be split up to 4 episodes this month, meaning every Sunday this month, hopefully, you'll see a user suggestions episode dedicated to all of you. Because frankly, some of these have so little info that I can hardly make an episode surrounding them, or they're so specific that I can't help but just talk about them here, because there's no other way I can. So let's take a look at some of the more unique entries this year, starting with...
My name is Angela, hey hello, welcome to my very own show.
Yeah, see, this is what I mean by highly specific requests, but I did get a few people that wanted me to cover Angela Anaconda, which, believe it or not, is something I can totally see being the source of some kids' nightmares. The show was created by Joanna Ferrone and Sue Rose. As far as I know, this is the only show Joanna ever worked on, but for Sue Rose, she actually worked on quite a few projects, and some of them you might even recognize, like Pepper Ann. Now, there's nothing about Angela Anaconda that's really, like, terrifying, per se. Just a really ugly show. Like, super ugly. And that's just a funny thing. You know, sometimes with kids, they just see something and they're just like, fuck. You know, it just through visuals alone, that sort of scares them and it tends to affect them for the rest of their lives. When I was a kid and I saw this, I actually thought it was just super boring. It's not really a terribly exciting show. It's just kind of a kid's show that happens to be animated with real kids' face. It kind of makes me wonder why it was ever animated in the first place, as it seems like that's just a hurdle that was so unnecessary because they really don't get into anything fantastical. It's really mundane, super boring, and ugly. I mean, how many times do I have to say that? It even runs like shit. This thing is running at like 3 frames a second. That's weird. It's a cartoon. I don't know. I don't get it, man. Just don't get it. Why are their faces black and white? It's so weird. I don't know. Now, as silly as it is to be afraid of Angela Anaconda and its strange vibes, nothing compares to its Kablam version, which, if you don't know what Kablam was, it was basically Nickelodeon's way of experimenting with new animation styles and techniques that they otherwise couldn't really implement into real shows. One of them was Angela Anaconda. I didn't even know it was part of Kablam at all, actually, since I used to watch it a lot as a kid, until I looked it up, and holy fucking shit, it looks worse. Obviously, it would look worse. It has a much smaller budget, and it doesn't really have the many resources that the actual show has, but damn, I literally didn't even think it would look worse. It actually looks fucking scary. It's uncanny as shit. What in the hell, man? Like, I would much prefer the other one over this one, but still, how did this turn into a full show? I think most kids would have fucking hated it. I'm still shocked that it became a show in the first place, but wow, this is... wow.
But hey, a lot of you wanted me to talk about it. No, well, not a lot of you, like 3 or 4. And here you are. This is for you guys. I totally get it, though. It's completely ugly looking, and that could sometimes be freaky to kids. But genuinely, it's just kind of boring. Now for an actual scary thing, Jaws. I've considered making a Jaws Traumathon episode for a little while, but to be frank, it always feels kind of awkward putting in films in Traumathon. It just feels like if I were to make most of my entries about horror flicks, then I might as well just announce to everyone that I'm ripping off Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. But I digress. Jaws is a horror film that changed the landscape of horror forever, and really shows how masterfully suspense and drama can be pulled off. That also ruined the reputation for sharks pretty much forever, but oh well. Yet there is a moment in Jaws that seems to stand out for most of you, as I keep getting this suggested to me almost every year now ever since Traumathon 3, which is Ben Gardner's boat scene. Now, you gotta keep in mind that this is back in the 70s, where mainstream films weren't really that graphic. Movies like these that came out and were very upfront about the gore and death were pretty rare, and they were just starting to show up more and more. So this kind of scene was super fucking shocking even back then. It showed the decaying body of one of the characters that were seen earlier, very, very briefly, sure, but it's crazy to see how accurate they got that corpse. It looks pretty much like a corpse that has been bloated and has been decaying because of the sea and the salt in the sea and all that stuff. Trust me, I know a little way too much about how corpses look like after they're in the sea. I'm fucked up. But not just that, not just the fact that it's a decaying corpse in the sea that just pops up out of nowhere and just scares the audience. It's also just cinematically done well. It's in pure darkness with just one source of light pointing at it, and it is held on to that one shot for a good moment to really let you absorb what's happening. It makes you scream out loud if you just see it. It's a wonderfully well done scene that apparently for a lot of you has stuck with you for a long time, and I can totally see why. The Cats with Hands is another one that a lot of y'all have actually suggested, and I've actually watched on my streams before. The Cat with Hands is a very short film, and I mean really short, about a man who fetches water from a well with, I guess, his co-worker? As he recants the story of the Cat with Hands, a monstrous creature that steals the parts of humans so that he too may be human someday. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of the story as it's really short, and I think any of you that can really give it a watch if you haven't heard of it before, and you totally should, but I was shocked to know that I've never heard of this short film at all until earlier this year when somebody suggested it through my Twitch streams. It's a 14-year-old project and was made by Robert Morgan, an amazingly talented stop-motion artist who has created some other unsettling stuff, such as Bobby Yeah, which we've also seen before. He has a very strange eye for the surreal and is incredibly effective in emulating the most unsettling visuals with the most bizarre stories, and as much as I've turned into a fan of his as of the research of this video, I sadly can't talk about most of his work because it hasn't met the 8-year parameter set for Traumathon. The Cat with Hands, however, is old enough and has been brought to my attention a few times. I genuinely think it's a masterfully done little creepy film that deserves way more remembrance. What it accomplishes in 3 minutes is wonderful, and it gives off a very Tim Burton-esque vibe with its dark whimsy. Seriously, check it out. I don't really dare to spoil this shit for people who haven't seen it, and if you have seen it, seriously consider checking out Robert Morgan's other work, as they're sure to give you some really fucked up vibes if you're really into this. Now here's a strange one that I actually recorded for last year's Traumathon, but ended up scrapping it because I didn't think it was going to really make sense if I added it for the user suggestions. But this year, I was suggested this again, so fuck it. Let's talk about this. Okay, yeah, I know. But hear me out. people have legitimately told me that this was a very scary thing for them. And I'm gonna be real with you, I thought it was scary too as a kid. I just think ending credits in general, it just always set me off as a kid. I don't know why. And to be honest, I think with this one in particular, it's even scarier looking back. Because, okay, let me tell you guys something that actually happened with me. See, ever since I moved to this new location where I live, I didn't really have anything apart from PS4, a TV that I bought that day, and some dishes so that I could eat some dinner. And there wasn't really any internet either. We had to wait about 2 to 3 days until the internet came to our house. And so I didn't really have any entertainment aside from the games that I already beat and had downloaded on my PS4, and I didn't really feel like doing that. So during this period, I bought a few DVDs, and one of them was the first 100 episodes of SpongeBob. Now, if you know this DVD, it literally has pretty much everything that you need in like about 10 discs or something like that. And I played the first disc and let the entirety of every single episode just play out from there. So it was just a few hours of SpongeBob, and then it suddenly cut. Now, here's the thing. The way that they cut it when you press the play all button, they totally skipped the credit sequence. So there's no intro. I mean, there's the intro for the first part, and then there's pretty much no credits whatsoever. It's all spliced together pretty cleanly. However, at the very end of this DVD, it just stops and it just starts to play the credits for every single episode you had just watched. So that's about 10 episodes you saw, and it just goes through all of them, every single one, all the credits, and it's playing this song all throughout. And there is something kind of fucking freaky about that, and I can't tell you why. And I've been pondering about this ever since last year when I was gonna add this in last year's user suggestions video, but I never really figured out why until I just realized there's some fucking liminal space shenanigans going on here. I don't know what it is. I think it's the wallpaper that's used here in this little credit sequence and that looping song that just sounds just happy enough, but just weird enough. If you just, I'm serious, listen to this song for like 5 minutes straight. It does not sound happy and cheery after all. It just sounds weird. It sounds like someone's smiling at you. That's what it is. This song sounds like the manifestation of someone smiling at you for a long time. And it's weird, you know? And liminal spaces, if you're not familiar, is stuff like this, where it seems like things that are familiar, but empty all the same. And a lot of liminal spaces feature rooms that have very weird decor or wallpaper that just sort of seems old or a little too bright or maybe too old. And that's sort of what's emulated here at the ending credit sequence of every SpongeBob episode. I'm not saying that SpongeBob is scary. I'm just saying, man, there is something genuinely freaky about that song and just staring at this credit sequence for a long time. And I bet most of you don't even notice that, because I think modern Nickelodeon just sort of has that thing, like that thing being the credit sequence, just sort of on the corner, and they give you like a preview of the next episode. So you don't really get the full effect of that. But when I was a kid, that shit didn't exist. You saw the full credit sequence, and I just saw that as an adult with this fucking TV. Man, it's weird, man. Okay, just fucking trust me on that. It really is weird. Don't go try it yourself. Like, listen to this song for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes straight, an hour straight, and just have this wallpaper right there. It doesn't, it's weird, okay? Just trust me. I totally get why people suggested this, all right? I just can't make a full episode about it. There's just not much to say other than what I just said, man. It's just weird. And finally, the last one that I really want to talk about. It's this one video that I've contemplated talking about for a full episode for a long time now, but I never really had enough information to really justify a full episode. So here, I'm talking about it right now. Real demons caught on tape. For those of you who don't know, Real Demons Caught on Tape is this really short film in which we see a man frantically running to his room, and he sees just a ton of hands just coming from the ceiling, the walls, underneath his door, until finally he sees this creature made out of hands that just finally jump scare him, and it all ends there. For a while, can you believe it that some people actually believe that this was real? This is real captured footage of demons on tape? I'm not even joking. Yes, there were a bunch of people who were that gullible, but at the same time, you have to understand that this was uploaded back in 2009 when people were super naive about the things they saw on the internet. Well, I guess that hasn't really changed, has it? But I have always been super fascinated by this short film because I had actually watched this film, not on the internet, but during a DARE program. Do you guys even remember DARE? Do you? So DARE was this thing where basically you were, whenever, just like a random day of the month, these cops show up at your classroom and they tell you drugs are bad, okay? And that's about it. And then they leave. But here's the thing. Sometimes they'd go super extreme with it. They would actually show you crime photos of people who have basically met the repercussions of drug abuse. So they would show people who've been addicts, people who have been super into cocaine and alcohol abuse and like cigarettes and like just all that stuff. And they'd show you these horrible graphic photos of people who have suffered through that. They were really aggressive about that stuff. Nowadays, I think the DARE program has been shut down because they've proven that DARE literally doesn't work and does the exact opposite. Instead of keeping kids off of drugs, it actually informs them about drugs and makes them more interested in actually trying it than actually preventing them from trying it. So that sucks. But I remember one particular officer came into our room and showed us this video, and he said that this was a recreation of what it's like to be high on LSD or something like that. I'm not even joking. They actually like try to force feed that down our throats. And I, for a long time, thought that that was what that video was, some sort of drug propaganda thing. And I have been looking for this video for a long time, its original source, but I haven't really found it. In fact, this video right here, I don't even think is the source. This is from Chester Tyler 714, which is the most popular re-upload of it, but that's not who made it. It turns out from a bit of digging, I found out that it was made by a man named Justin Martinez, and he actually gives down a pretty deep interview as to how he made it, why he made it, and all that other stuff. And it's really interesting if you're really into filmmaking and you want to know exactly how he made the hands go through the walls and the ceilings and how he made that hand monster. He pretty much goes in depth on how he created that and all that junk. So I'll leave the link down in the description below, but it is in the Wayback Machine archived website, so it's gonna look pretty old and dated. But it is interesting stuff to actually look into, and I was super happy when I actually found out about it, because for the longest time people would either say that this is real ghost footage, this was some drug propaganda thing, this was some other stuff, but now I actually found it through Adult Swim when I was watching one of their off-the-air episodes, the one entitled Nightmares, in which you actually finally see Justin Martinez get credit for the shit that he made. I was really happy for that. Unfortunately, there's not much else I can say, but seriously, if you want to learn more about this, he gives an entire interview with that website. Click on the link down below and you'll see all that. I'm surprised we've been going through Traumathon 5 and we've yet to talk about a specific spooky viral video that apparently disturbed a ton of people. I should know. This is one of those highly requested topics people wanted me to cover. We, of course, will be talking about... This is Pete. He's a meat puppet and the source of so many people's traumas. It is astounding just how many people have told me to cover Pete the meat puppet, and I think it all has to do with Pete himself and his story. See, Pete is a meat puppet, a puppet of meat, in fact. A puppet sewn together by a lonely butcher woman who had no lover or any kids of her own. So she decided to create her own child, and cobbled together a bunch of meats, sausages, short ribs, loose leg of lamb, until eventually little Pete was made and was given life by sucking his mother's big old titty. Not even joking, he actually does come to life because of her breast milk. That's
It's pretty gnarly, dude. But hey, whatever. So this scared the shit out of his mom, who died out of fright. And this is when Pete decided to live on his own and try to find the meaning of life, living humbly as a vagabond, working as a janitor at a fast food joint where he struck fortune when the manager made him the face of his company. Pete got it all: money, fame, women, booze, drugs, and he fucked a cow. You know, he really fucks a cow, which leads him to his downfall as he quickly rose once to fame, now is struck down like Lucifer himself into earth as he was cast down by God like lightning. Not that dramatic, he just became broke. And so Pete lives on as a hobo, moving from town to town, trying to find that meaning of life his mother once told him to find when she died. So, this weird video, as weird as it is and as silly as it is, for a lot of people has proven to be one of the most disturbing videos on the internet for them. And I don't totally blame you. I think when it comes down to puppets, we're pretty much always going to have one puppet video for Traumathon annually, honestly. But puppets are freaky, so I don't blame you on that. But Pete's puppet body is way creepier than most, seeing as how he's a meat puppet, a puppet of meat. And it gives him a scarier visage than I think most puppets would have. Well, hang on. Actually, now that I'm saying that, wait a minute.
All God's creatures, fresh off the grill. So come on down to Mr. Meaty with friends meat to eat. Meat.
What is it with puppets and meat? Seriously, something weird about that combo. But aside from that, I think Pete's story is a sad one that is all too familiar with most people. It doesn't even have to pertain to anyone who is famous or fortunate or anything like that, but to anyone really. Anyone who feels like they can't really get out of their own situations, no matter how hard they try. It's a commentary on the socio-economical problems of American values and how so many of us chase after that quote-unquote American dream just for 98% of us to just die off without any real fame or fortune. See, the reality is, it's not about the money or the fame, but about your own true path. That path that leads you and others down to happiness, without having to resort to the suffering of others, of course. In that regard, Pete the Meat Puppet, the puppet of meat that is a very insightful commentary on the world as it is now, and as it was then, especially with its aesthetics resembling that of an old 40s flick, around the time the movie industry really boomed and eclipsed all of entertainment and media, becoming one of the premier ways people consumed media. Wow. The people behind this must have been like some sort of connoisseurs of art, like some real art house motherfuckers. Who made this video? Diesel? Oh, what are they? Some sort of production company that like makes films or something like that? I don't know, man. Let's check them out. Oh. Wait, they sell clothes? They don't even make short films. What the fuck? Well, yeah, it's true. They don't make short films at all. In fact, you might be thinking, wait, so why make any of this at all? What are you, stupid? Do you not see what Pete... I'm serious, this is actually true. Do you not see what Pete's wearing? He's wearing designer fucking jeans. And who sells these jeans? It's Diesel. No fucking joke. This is an ad campaign for Diesel's jeans. I'm not fucking around. I'm not even gonna bother looking for the exact jeans he's wearing. Jeans all kind of look the same, honestly. And also because this was an ad campaign from like 14 years ago, they probably don't sell those specific jeans anymore, or they're outdated or something. And honestly, who cares about the jeans? But yes, this was made as a commercial for their jeans. It kind of sullies this message, don't you think? It gets even worse, actually, because Pete made another debut on I guess a Diesel live stream? Some weird experimental shit, I guess, and Pete was there, selling his own branded jerky. And, well, they were just kind of making, like, the kinds of jokes that you would make with meat.
She just took a cleaver and started whacking away at the meat, you know?
She did?
Yeah.
Really?
She
so
made
your mother
me.
beat her meat, did she?
Look
My
at that.
Goodness.
Take a piece of my meat and stick it in your mouth.
Now, genuinely, I can't find much more about the making of Pete, nor exactly what he was promoting, if he really was promoting jeans, or maybe the whole product or the whole brand as a whole. I'm not really sure, nor why he was on this show, but I think it's worth noting that Diesel sort of does this kind of shit all the time. No joke, here's another one of their short ad campaigns about a lady who literally bathes in hair. Not her own hair, but the hair of her adoring fans. What? She really fucking loves hair. And yes, at one point, you really could send her your real fucking hair at this address. It's not available anymore, but wow, why? All this to sell you designer jeans and whatever else that Diesel sells. But like I said, Diesel has a history of controversial ads. Nowadays, they're pretty weird, sure, but back in the day, they had some really, really controversial ads in magazines. It's just the thing that they're known for and the thing that they kind of embrace. They don't really show their products, nor really show off what they need to sell. But if you can remember the ad, then it sticks with you way more. Because unlike most brands who shove their products right in front of your face and are sometimes unapologetic about it, Diesel sort of does what they want. If you want to check out their clothing, you're free to do so. What matters is that your mind was engaged for a moment with visions and concepts that you'd otherwise never really think about. You were fed with creativity, not products. But if we want to be cynical, don't worry, Diesel made another weird video called the Diesel Christmas Song, which showcases the kind of commercials Diesel is trying to avoid to be, and they're super aggressive about it, showing you their products right in front of your face, and Diesel is pretty much super cynical about it the entire way through, but it's funny. It's anti-consumer, I suppose, to not really tell people what you're selling, but Diesel doesn't really care. They just want to do something weird, something to make you question what they're all about, and honestly, the fact that we're even talking about them and their fucking designer jeans from Italy is all the proof you need to show that sometimes you just need to get creative to last longer than the competition, because otherwise we'd probably never be talking about this to this day. It's all because this puppet is made out of meat. I don't know. Found footage documentaries, or mockumentaries as they're sometimes called, are one of, if not my absolute favorite subgenres of horror. There's a human element when it comes to found footage films, a human element that is very difficult to emulate with contemporary horror films. It gives you this unique perspective of the characters from a first-person viewpoint, giving you a more claustrophobic experience than your average horror flick. It's a fascinating perspective that you don't often get, and it immerses you more than any other film genre. Ever since I was a kid, I fell in love with found footage films, and it all started, of course, with the Blair Witch. Remember when we all thought the Blair Witch Project was real? Well, that love only grew when I found out that it was meticulously crafted as sort of a hoax. Seriously, the magic never wore off even after doing more digging. It didn't just promote itself as real through the trailers, but it also had a website that coexisted with it, along with a fake documentary that aired alongside the film's release date. It's the effort that makes these films special, and these kinds of films can spark inspiration, especially with the resurgence of interest lately with analog horror, such as, of course, Mandela Catalog, which have proven to be a sort of reboot into the found footage genre, just under a new guise. It's something the genre needed, new talent and possibly a new way to tell their stories. Let's face it, found footage can be a mixed bag. It's not always you watch a found footage mockumentary that actually entices you or is really that great or memorable even, yet the ones that stick with you for life. And that's why I want to talk about Noroi, The Curse, my absolute favorite found footage / mockumentary film I've pretty much ever seen, and one of my favorite films of all time. It's an absolutely disturbing wild ride into the world of the paranormal, and gives you an insight of how to really make something more grounded to make something more spooky. This masterpiece was crafted by Koji Shiraishi, an enigmatic director with an eclectic taste for the paranormal. Now, Shiraishi has a pretty infamous filmography, including the infamous Grotesque, which actually got banned in the UK and subsequently got taken down in Amazon Japan. It's actually hard to come by physically because of that. Some of his other works, like Occult and Cult, also deal with much more of the same themes as Noroi, that being the paranormal and, well, cults. I won't spoil those films for you, and maybe someday we'll talk more about Shiraishi's work, but I genuinely think Noroi is Shiraishi's magnum opus. I love the subtlety and the way he immerses the audience into this documentary. And if you were none the wiser, you might actually think for a moment that it's real. It's got such memorable yet disturbing visuals, a real gruesome and brutal story, and memorable characters. It relies so much on subtlety and sounds than it does on actual jump scares to actually scare its audience, and for that reason it sticks with you for a long time even after you watch the film. But enough hype. Let's actually talk about the movie itself. The film starts off by telling us that this is a documentary, and it's based on the work of the documentarian Masafumi Kobayashi, a paranormal investigator who disappeared under mysterious circumstances after finishing his documentary, The Curse, which is Noroi in Japanese. Once he had completed this project, Kobayashi disappeared just after his house burned to the ground, and his wife's remains are the only body that they found in the house. The rest of the documentary shows the last footage that Kobayashi ever captured for his upcoming film that he just never released, documenting his investigation into the paranormal and specifically the haunting of one actress who believes she's been haunted by a specific ghost that has been following her around ever since she visited a haunted forest. All the while, we get a sub-story about a little girl who is shown to have psychic powers, with this whole film playing out as a sort of mixed narrative that hops between three different stories that ultimately culminate into one whole ending. It's never too hard to follow either, it's pretty well written. In fact, so much of what's happening in the background makes it feel like this world Shiraishi just made is constantly moving forward, and the way it's shot together with some of the more creepier elements sparingly shown, we see that the true strength of this movie is the ambiance. The use of the ambient music enhances the horror without overpowering it, giving us a subtle and creepy vibe pretty much all the way through. It makes you feel unnerved every time new pieces of info are shown, as so much of the horror comes in the form of its subtlety and the build-up. Just when you think nothing is going to happen, you get a scene like this that brings you back into the movie. There's just so many moments where this film is very quiet and very minor with the things that they show, small details, but it enhances the creep factor tenfold because the world feels real to you. There's nothing too dramatic, nothing too surreal. It all feels solid, grounded. That's due in part to the fact that even when the paranormal things are showcased, it's never too overt to the point where it's obviously fake. The paranormality shown feels organic, like this could in fact be the cause of something paranormal, but nothing outside the realm of possibility. I won't spoil the ending, as I highly recommend watching this on your own time, but even watching the film for the first time, you can feel a weird pit of uneasiness in your stomach, like the film is all leading up to something real bad. After all, you learn within the first few seconds that Kobayashi had his house mysteriously burned down with his wife inside, and he's currently missing. It's set up perfectly so that you can actually begin to wonder what's going to happen to everyone else. What really grounds this to reality is how carefully everything is woven together to seem as authentic as possible. One good example is the use of Japan's variety show format. As mentioned before, there's a girl with psychic powers named Kana. This segment, which features her, cleverly emulates Japanese variety shows about the paranormal. See, in Japan, they have a long-standing history with their fascination of the occult and all that paranormal stuff that they're very much in tune with, as most Asian cultures are. In this case, they're paying tribute to those kinds of TV shows that are aired in Japan that show these paranormal activities and these sort of occult things that so many of them are fascinated with. And if you're like me and you kind of looked up to these kinds of Japanese paranormal shows growing up, you can tell that they look exactly like this. And it's this kind of attention to detail that really can fool people into thinking that this is totally real. And what helps sell the illusion even further is the acting and the characters themselves, as the performers do a great job in conveying their emotional turmoil, each one dealing with their own strife, their own horror, and you can really feel everyone's struggle. Even this accentuates more eccentric characters like Mitsuo Hori, described as a super psychic who is highly sensitive to ghosts. His eccentric nature is funny at first, but tragic when you really see he's not that bad of a guy, just someone who's in constant pain, and when he sees shit like this, can you blame him? Poor guy's just in a constant fucking state of agony, and he clearly doesn't even want these powers. As the film goes on, more mysteries pop up. It portrays the paranormal, ghosts, as if they were something tangible, and in many ways, that's what makes this film truly scary. Because what if ghosts really were a thing that existed? Something that could be captured or controlled to attack your enemies or to attack you. Sometimes they can possess you into doing something that you'd otherwise never do. Something that will force you to disappear forever without a trace. See, when it comes to most ghost movies or ghost flicks, these sorts of questions are never asked, just sort of shown. That's what's the fundamental failure is for most movies that are about the paranormal. People are more interested in seeing the ghosts and showing them off and showing what they can do, as opposed to never really focusing on the human element of them. Because at the end of the day, that's what we, the audience, can attach ourselves to. It's what makes films like The Exorcist last for a long time, because it doesn't really focus on the demon itself. That's just a cause for the family's suffering. The real focus is on the mother and Regan herself, both on their suffering and how to deal with these issues. The demon, sure, is one thing, but it's the unknown aspects of what the demon can do and the little help they can receive that truly is scary. You can replace her demonic possession with anything that's unknown to us. Like any sort of disease that hasn't really been controlled or really solved or cured before. That's sort of what it represents, the unknown and our helplessness against the unknown. And I feel like Noroi not only has a compelling human narrative that also shows our struggles against the unknown, but also in the paranormal sense, it portrays ghosts and other paranormal entities as something incomprehensible to the point where they sometimes don't make sense or aren't very consistent. Because of course they wouldn't be. They're ghosts. They probably don't even know that they're really doing anything either. And when you put it like that, ghosts become more terrifying as a concept. They become more unknown and less controlled, more chaotic and far beyond our comprehension. Who's to say what a ghost is or what a ghost wants? And when we see them, will we know what they are? Noroi the Curse is a masterclass in analog horror and found footage for every reason I've given you. Sometimes people just focus on the visuals and the effects themselves, rather than the immersion that analog horror and found footage can really bring, the groundedness of it all, and the sort of drama that can be brought with it. The human element, and the reminder that this could happen to anyone, anytime. Koji Shiraishi's meticulous approach and love for the paranormal shine through every frame. If you're a fan of the genre, this film is a must-watch, especially for the Halloween season. And like I said, maybe someday I'll go more in depth on not only Noroi, but Shiraishi's work itself. That's just gonna be a topic for after Traumathon is done, I guess, because really, there's so much I want to say about the film, but I don't want to spoil anything for you. I think it's worth watching for the first time for anyone. Trust me, I acknowledge that I was very vague about the movie's story and what it actually shows and the actual ghosts that are in it and, you know, the whole maternal / the infant themes that are spread across throughout this film. But trust me, it's better you don't know that much and actually experience it yourself rather than have me spoil the scares. I hope I did a good job in illustrating why this movie is one of my favorites and why it's really scary. And even for the few scary scenes that I've shown you, it's nearly not enough. Without the context, honestly, they're not even that scary. You seriously have to watch it on your own. Or with some friends, who knows? In the meantime, go check it out however you can and with whoever you want to watch it with. I guarantee it'll be one of the scariest films you've ever seen. And if it's not, go fuck yourself. I gotta stop saying. During the 90s, Luigi was seen as the underdog of the Mario franchise, always being in his brother's shadow and never really doing much except for showing up on the side. But during the late 90s, even his role was relegated as no more than just a mere cameo, if even that, with Mario 64 seeing him absent, actually, and Paper Mario just having him be there in the background. Not much was happening for the Green Plumber until eventually, during Space World 2000, we saw Luigi's very first debut in a solo title called Luigi's Mansion. Actually, that's not totally true. 1999, there was another, kind of demo that showed, but that's, lost media, so it doesn't really
Yeah, anyways. Surprisingly, Luigi's Mansion had quite a lot planned for it, having 3D capabilities slated to be implemented alongside multiple GameCube games, but sadly it was scrapped because, well, 3D TVs weren't very mainstream, and the cost to make games to be developed with 3D implementations would have meant that all GameCube games would have cost way more for consumers, so Nintendo scrapped the idea entirely for pretty much everything. Just a little footnote, because I know a lot of people were going to point that out if I didn't. But hey, let's focus on the actual game itself, and honestly, I ain't gonna say much in terms of the development. This is Friday the 13th, I hope everyone's okay, but I just kind of want to gush about this game because I fucking love it, a ton. And I've been meaning to talk about it, like, for forever now. I just sort of thought that I really needed to be interesting on the info on it before I actually made a video on it, but you know what, everyone else has sort of done that, so fuck it, let me just gush over this game for today. Luigi's Mansion does something pretty unique for the time, which was being spooky without being scary. See, games back then were pretty clear in what kind of genre they were. Scary games were scary, platformer games were platformy, and shooter games were shooty. But everyone was breaking new grounds and becoming something nobody had ever seen before, and those who chose to tread those new grounds were often recognized forever as accomplishing something new. Something fresh, something never seen before. And while Luigi may not have started something new in horror, it definitely gave players something that they hadn't experienced before in terms of atmosphere. A game like Resident Evil, for example, is purely horror, as with Silent Hill. They were games meant to scare you and made you feel like you were on the verge of death with every corner. Meanwhile, Luigi's Mansion focused on the atmosphere without ever letting go of the fun vibes that come with the Mario universe. And what's funny is that the best part of Luigi's Mansion that sells this atmosphere isn't the ghosts or the room, but rather something that many horror games struggle with even now, and that's lighting. Lighting is the key factor in setting the mood for literally anything in media, be it movies or games. You have to find the perfect balance between having enough darkness to make the player scared, but not too much where they can't see and handicap them. Enough light shone onto the environments to guide players, but not too much where they never feel like they're in danger. In fact, the lighting is so good that it might have unintentionally made a few scares accidentally. This little glitch has been rumored to be part of the game's integral design for a long time, and that's partly due to the fact that the lighting is just that good that it fooled so many people into believing that it was some sort of symbolism, but in fact it is a glitch. And sorry, that might have been heartbreaking for some of you to learn, but hey, that little accident still in the game, and for a lot of people it still means what they think it means. Speaking of lighting, Luigi's Mansion cleverly uses the flashlight to help players feel confident in guiding themselves rather than being guided by the game itself through other light sources. It's literally giving players their own waypoint without having to resort to obvious pointers. And of course, when a room is cleared of ghosts or when certain objectives are met, the room is permanently lit up and the spooky vibes are gone, implementing exactly what I said a horror game should implement. Light rooms to show safety, dark rooms to represent danger, flashlights to guide players. It is classic good shit. And you know, Luigi's Mansion development team have never really been open about what inspired Luigi's Mansion, but I think if you're a horror game fan, you can see so many elements of so many horror games just implemented in this game, and I'm using that word a lot, sorry. The flashlight, of course, being super reminiscent of Silent Hill 1, which at the time had some of the best lighting of its era, especially with the use of the flashlight's real-time lighting, which was seen as revolutionary during its release. Light rooms representing safety and the use of music, or in this case, lack thereof, gives Resident Evil vibes with the way they use safe rooms. And of course, doors being locked is such a classic in any horror game. It's clear that Nintendo had tons of inspirations from actual horror games and lifted a ton of their own mechanics from those said inspirations. But that's not to sell Nintendo short. After all, taking inspiration and stealing ideas is integral for progress. And there's a ton of original ideas in this game that those small tributes to horror games in the past are dwarfed by the game's charm and originality, which just oozes right from the get-go, especially with the introduction of EGAD, which has become a fan favorite for so many. And of course, let's not forget that this is Luigi's first ever solo adventure, which has essentially solidified his character forever. A timid adventurer that has to be brave to really get through some of the craziest shit his little Italian eyes have ever seen, just so he could save the world. This is the game that pretty much made Luigi fans have more an excuse to be a Luigi fan.
This game made him an icon in his own right. I mean, sure, he's still eclipsed by his own brother's greatness, but this showed a ton of fans that the man has his own life, his own style, and lots of people respect him for that and love Luigi even more because of that personality that he exudes. Personality aside though, lots of people also appreciate the bold new approach in gameplay by Nintendo, as they were doing something totally different than they were never really used to before, not just in terms of atmosphere, but how the game plays. It plays more like an action puzzle game where you suck up all the ghosts and have to carefully learn their patterns, how they move, and where you should move. It's addicting as each battle turns out to be like their own mini puzzle, and the ghost designs are wonderful. The whole premise of hunting down these ghosts and turning them into paintings is just so charming and cute, and the family of ghosts that live in the mansion and control certain rooms is also just a wonderful touch. Also, was it just me, or are some of these portrait ghosts way scarier than I remembered? Seriously, they're kind of spooky. They kind of remind me of the ghosts from 13 Ghosts, who were also pretty unique in their designs, and oh yeah, it also takes place in a mansion, huh? These portrait ghosts act as either bosses or just mini bosses, some even being optional with unique ways to capture them, and that sort of shit really makes you think, and it just gives them all personalities and sort of this unique experience for everyone as they all collectively try to learn how to get these ghosts. Or they just, you know, they buy Nintendo Power or one of those gaming magazines that pretty much spoil everything, but are often really wrong. Yeah. Remember that? You know, whatever. Accompanying the wacky designs of the ghosts themselves is the wonderful soundtrack composed by Shinobu Tanaka and Kazumi Totaka, which is incredible because this was one of Tanaka's first projects at Nintendo, and Totaka was already an established composing veteran, so these two minds really made a unique sound for the game's soundtrack that is pretty iconic to this day. And of course, speaking of the present, we have the sequels, which, you know, I have mixed opinions about, though if you enjoy them, that's totally on you, and you're so valid for loving them. I just prefer the original myself. It's a game I don't mind revisiting now and again. It's got its own unique charm that honestly even most games nowadays struggle to emulate. And by that I of course mean both games that try to be scary and cute, and games that are trying to just be scary. Sometimes these games don't really nail what even Luigi's Mansion was able to nail. And this is coming from a company that doesn't even make horror games. Just goes to show that with enough passion, love, care, really good lighting, and lightning in a bottle, you can pretty much expect nothing short of greatness with that kind of formula. And you might even learn a thing or two.
Wow. Actually, super surprised. Why did I say that like Owen Wilson? Wow. I'm super surprised that we haven't actually talked about this yet. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Premiering first in 1998, it showcased something Scooby-Doo never really tackled before, and that was trying to actually be good for once. Okay, look, seriously, I've never liked Scooby-Doo, and I'm surprised so many people like him now, I think. It's sort of a testament of how shoving as much of a product down your throat as possible can make it pretty much last forever, as Scooby-Doo has lasted since around the 70s all the way till today, with the latest iteration of Scooby-Doo being everyone's favorite. Or not. But let's forget about all that and talk about pretty much everyone's childhood favorite, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. I think most people can unanimously agree that Zombie Island was the shit, even if you weren't a fan of Scooby-Doo stuff. In fact, I don't even think I've ever met anyone that didn't like this movie. I think it's been made clear that this is a highly lauded Scooby-Doo animated film, and by far one of the best. In fact, it's so popular that it got a sequel. We're not gonna talk about that one at all. And part of the main reason, if not the biggest reason, that this is the most popular Scooby-Doo flick is the simple fact that it's the realest one. I'm talking real in the sense of danger and narrative and paranormal bullshit, etc, etc. Even that animation style emulates a sort of grounded realness that pretty much no other Scooby-Doo film has ever replicated. Save, of course, for one particular film, but yeah. Maybe some other time. Now let's get into the actual meat of this film and talk about the whole premise. Scooby-Doo and the gang have just wrapped up their final mystery, proving once again that the monster... This has gotten the gang pretty jaded as they've gone separate ways to follow new careers to hopefully fulfill their curiosity and passions. Unfortunately, this too has proven to be pretty vapid, as all of them really aren't too happy. But as Daphne announces that she'll be going coast to coast, solving the biggest mysteries in America, Fred uses this opportunity to get the gang back together for one last adventure. The gang solves the usual mysteries, getting increasingly disappointed by each one because they're all fake, until they find a young woman by the name of Lena Dupree, who informs them of her very real and very haunted home, Moonscar Island. It's here we see the gang take on real paranormal shit like ghosts and zombies, and I gotta admit, man, the first ghost scene was the shit. And that's really fucking scary. I mean, genuinely, it scared me as a kid. That is no exaggeration. It's really creepy and super well done, the way this ghost is portrayed, writing creepy letters on the wall, levitating Velma, which was pretty much my sexual awakening into nerdy shy girls, and best of all, was probably the very first recorded example of an animated analog horror. No, seriously, Fred captures this on tape, and when they play it back, we get this super creepy moment where they could see the ghost of Captain Moonscar writing on the wall. It is so fucking creepy, but really stupid when you really think about the technicalities. But let's suspend our belief for a moment and really appreciate this scene. But you know, that's not the only thing that's creepy. Genuinely, this entire film, right as soon as they land on Moonscar Island, ups the stakes. I mean, Shaggy and Scooby almost die multiple times, and they don't do no cartoon getaway to solve their problems. They genuinely have to deal with some real shit and solve most of it realistically. And that's what the fuck I've been saying about horror for years now. If you make the situations real and not cartoonishly stupid, you can get some genuine terror and horror by just being grounded. The reason why some movies fail nowadays in scaring their audience is because they're so focused on the effects and the in-your-face spooks, when really sometimes you just need to make everything real, you know? And I guess for a lot of people, being real means being boring. But we can clearly see, even in Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, being real adds so much. It adds drama, it adds to the comedy, it adds suspense, and of course, it adds to the spooks. Now, of course, more mystical mumbo-jumbo happens towards the end of the film that really seems far more cartoonish and silly, but hey, at the end of the day, it's still a kid's movie about Scooby-Doo, not a real horror film. But the in-between stuff is so memorable, especially the zombie stuff, which is just so scary and otherworldly. Like, it's crazy just how real they get with this. Like, these aren't animatronics or actors or hallucinations, or... We're not going to acknowledge that. No, fuck it. Yeah, we are. Okay, we'll acknowledge it for a second. Zombie Island 2, yes, the sequel, fucking ruins this movie. They said apparently that they weren't real zombies, like they were hallucinations or some shit like that. Like, really? Who cares? Honestly, who cares? The point is, Zombie Island 1 fucking rocks, and no sequel, no matter how canon it wants to make itself, is not going to ruin that for me. It's certainly not going to ruin the killer soundtrack, which I can't play much of due to copyright. Yet, if you guys want to check out Zombie Island for yourself, go ahead and do so. It's genuinely an incredible film, and it's spooky, and it's just so much fun. And dude, I have it playing in the background right now of this recording. I'm not even joking. I love this film a ton. It's so memorable, it's so atmospheric, it really brings in the Halloween spirit, man. It's just wonderful. Check it out. I'm sorry that this isn't super informative. I just wanted to gush about a movie I really liked, and I hope you guys appreciated that. Okay, bye. See you tomorrow.
Demi Lovato has made it clear that calling aliens is racist, and we should instead strive to be better and call them something less racist, like star people. Well, in honor of our non-binary royalty, in honor of our queen, we will not be calling aliens by their dead names, and we will instead be calling them star people for the rest of this video. Please be respectful. Star people. Alright, I'm giving up, I'm sorry. It's too much. Aliens. Since the beginning of time, mankind has wondered if there is life beyond the stars, if we're alone on this godforsaken rock, or if there are friends out there waiting for us to make contact with them, or enemies. Fast forward to the modern age, and it seems that maybe it's other beings out there that are trying to make contact with us. Ever since the incident in Roswell involving strange flying crafts hovering over the Nevada town of Roswell, alien sightings have been far more common for damn near close to 100 years. This turned out to be the origin of interest for aliens in the modern age. The Roswell incident, as well as the nuclear age, the Cold War, as well as the space race, sort of accelerating the average person's interest in aliens and other celestial beings. This was pretty much the era that had humans questioning more and more what our governments were capable of, as well as what they were hiding. If the Roswell incident was a cover-up, people thought, then what else could the government be hiding? And so spawned the space age, where people were more skeptical of the government and were more interested in fantasies of aliens, whose stories became more prevalent in fiction such as movies, comics, and books. But even then, it can be argued that many cultures around the world have seen UFOs, or UAPs as they're now called, for centuries now. So interest has always been there for mankind, if not niche. Though truthfully, I'm not going to really entertain that because most people's evidence towards other cultures making contact with alien life derives from the fact that other cultures are just weird. This is... Look, seriously, this is a real edit from a History Channel show about fucking aliens. It's dumb, dude, seriously. Besides that, focusing on modern day evidence is much more fascinating anyways. As a child who was really getting into more occult stuff, UFOs were right up there for me in my quest to find anything slightly paranormal being real. Unfortunately, my obsession had unwanted side effects of making me afraid of being abducted. No shit, I really was afraid of that. Like, there was a butt ton of alien documentaries and alien movies that just sort of popped up one day. Sure, alien movies were always a thing, but because of the advent of camcorders, amateur UFO hunting skyrocketed sometime in the late 80s and early 90s, so the amount of evidence that was piling on became more prominent. This ramped up alien sightings to an 11, as everyday people could now point to the sky and say, oh, what is that? Now, most of the time, it was just airplanes that people don't recognize, or blimps, or even like, I don't know, other stars, even. But thanks to all of this, we saw a resurgence of interest in aliens as a whole. Before this, aliens were more a background entity, sort of like how ghosts used to be. They were nothing more than science fiction, and though there were sightings that spread across the world, most people who were into alien research were a very small collective of people. However, thanks to the new coming digital age and easier access to cameras, this number grew and grew every year, to the point where people now believe that the government is withholding alien tech and secrets and might even be run by aliens. Ooh. Now obviously crackpot theories have been around forever, but with the access of the internet, it seems like these kind of people who make these kinds of theories have germinated, and more have popped up now. But you know, let's sift away from the more convoluted and clearly wacky weird theories and just talk about the potential of it all. See, because that's always been the conversation. If aliens were true, who knows, why are they hiding it from us? Is it to protect us? Are we worth protecting? Well, who fucking cares when we got the singer and guitarist of Blink-182 to help shed some light on our asses? Huh. Yeah, so Tom DeLonge, somehow he found a way to get actual UFO evidence. And yeah, it's real. Like, how did he get this info? He just kind of asked for it, apparently. But there's all these confusing nuanced details that I don't really want to get into. The point is, he actually found UFO info that forced the government to say, yeah, UFOs exist. Now, I'm not saying that this in fact proves aliens exist also, but UFOs do actually exist, as in unidentified flying objects do hover above our heads almost constantly. Some people ran with this and immediately started saying aliens exist, sure, but there's no real proof of extraterrestrial beings interfering in our human lives, just sort of that there are things out there that we can't really fully explain. By the way, can we talk real quick about how UFOs are now called UAPs? Apparently they're doing this now because too many people in the army were being big fucking pussies about reporting UFOs because they were afraid about sounding crazy. So now they're called UAPs. And that's stupid. But it doesn't end there. Some dude earlier this year came out and said, hey, aliens are real. Like, for really real. I could show you evidence that they're really real, for super real, actually. And the world collectively shrugged. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there's that thing in Mexico. That thing. Yeah. Right. So what happened to everyone's interest in aliens? What happened to the wonders that people had about these little gray men that we were all kind of addicted to back then when we were kids, back when our grandparents were kids? Why the sudden disinterest? All this stuff is coming out at pretty much lightning fast speed compared to the past hundreds of years that we as a collective, as a humanity, as mankind have been wondering forever now if there are aliens. Suddenly we get all this info within 5 years and then everyone's just kind of like, who cares? Well, for starters, that happened. So nobody really could give a shit because too much shit was happening. Secondly, I think the evidence shown isn't really convincing enough for most people, and I think this gives some UFO hunters / alien enthusiasts some credit. The reason they're not head over heels about this whole thing is because, really, what does this prove? Speaking for myself, I just kind of want to see an actual alien craft and real alien bodies. I've been seeing blips for decades now. I kind of want more. And to be fair, that one footage shown back in 2019 about the UFO was super exciting. It was more than a blip. It was a blip confirmed by the government. And fact of the matter is, when the government said, hey, I don't know what this is, it could be anything, it got a lot of people going, holy shit, that's kind of crazy. That is exciting news. But it doesn't really mean shit. It doesn't lead to anything, it just leads to more questions, which is fine. We've been asking so many questions for so many years now, but when are we gonna get actual answers? Even the so-called answers that we're getting are pretty lukewarm. Listen, the reality is, even though this guy said that there are aliens, he ain't really show shit, and he's pretty hesitant to show shit. In fact, most of his evidence that the government confirmed that there are aliens is just some guy within the government he talked to confirming that he can say that there are aliens, but that he isn't allowed to share with the people government secrets. So he can technically say that there are aliens because there aren't aliens? Is that what the government said? I don't know. I mean, it's just convoluted and weird. And speaking of convoluted and weird, this thing... Look, there's the whole Mexican alien thing, which is just such a joke. Didn't they send this alien to like local labs and they basically just said, yeah, like these are aliens? Look, I don't really even want to entertain the possibilities of these things even being real, and genuinely, I don't think anyone wants to either. Yet I feel if this were another time period, say maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, people might have had more interest in these things. And that's sort of the point I'm trying to make here. There was a boom, a rise in interest for alien content, for better or for worse. Maybe they might be shit, maybe it was pretty good evidence, but at the same time, people at least gave it a chance. To the point where dozens of alien shows rose in the late 90s and 2000s because of this evidence. Dozens of alien movies came out of nowhere because of our fascination of space, yet it seems now that interest has sort of ran dry. I genuinely think that humanity is much more curious and open nowadays, and I'm not using Twitter as an example of humanity because like it's just not. I think the general consensus wants to believe and wants to learn more, yet we have no answers. I don't think aliens are lame nowadays, honestly. I just think most people who are enthused about aliens are kind of tired about them. And with people getting better at CG and effects, it gets genuinely hard to remain interested when you've kind of seen it all and pretty much think all of it is fake. What we need next is answers. If what we have next is yet another guy talking about how aliens are for really real, for real, actually super for real, I think most of us will just shrug again. What we really need now is just proof. Yet with this surge of quote-unquote evidence, there's no doubt a surge of interest comes with it, and maybe in the future we'll even see more spooky alien evidence, more spooky alien movies, and more spooky alien documentaries to consume and to enjoy. Except for this one. This one genuinely sucks. Stop supporting it. You know, James from Dead Meat said it best when he described Mortal Kombat as not really a horror franchise, but very horror adjacent as a series. But if you're expecting me to argue that Mortal Kombat is unequivocally a horror game franchise, then you'll be incredibly disappointed. But my argument of this franchise having many horror elements in it could at least sway you to see why I and many others see this game as horror adjacent. To begin, let's discuss Mortal Kombat itself. It is the highest selling fighting game of all time, no joke, it really is, and part of that has to do with, well, the nature of the game itself. It's a game full of memorable characters, interesting stories, comics, full of lore, as well as movies, shows, toys, figurines. And yet, at the end of the day, sometimes we just want to fuck people up so hard that we can't really tell the difference between their face and their ass. Yeah, Mortal Kombat's pretty awesome. Fatalities aside, it can't be denied that Mortal Kombat is the most influential game out there, and the most important game in America, at least, as it forced the games industry here to start rating their games. And of course, it all has to do with the ultra-violence this game contains. Now, as kids, we thought some of this shit was cool, but I gotta say, man, some of these fatalities gave me nightmares. And really, can you blame me? Learning about the concept of death was kind of hard as a kid, but here's this video game that showed you hundreds of different ways someone could die, and all of a sudden, it just all starts to click. It's not like a shooting game when you just shoot someone, they're fucking dead, they just come back. No, in this game, you're fucking dead. And it says right there, in bold red letters, fatality. But that's something I kind of appreciate about Mortal Kombat, at least as an adult anyways. Mortal Kombat is brutal and has all these horror undertones underneath it. It gives off this sort of spooky vibes that no other fighting game really does well. I mean, sure, there's Darkstalkers. Of course there's Darkstalkers. Everybody's got to mention that, right? And all the awesome stuff that's there, the creepy stages, the awesome characters, the wonderful art. But it's not really that horrifying. It's got spooky vibes, sure, but something about Mortal Kombat just seems off sometimes. Look, I'll be frank with you. This video is a personal one to me. For a long time, Mortal Kombat, as much as I loved it, kind of scared me in so many ways as a kid, and I want to share that feeling with you in hopes that you'll understand me, or perhaps you'll share my sentiment. So I hope you indulge me in my personal ramblings and nostalgia for a game that scared me so many years ago, but I couldn't really quite keep away from. First off, I want to talk about what exactly I mean by horror adjacent, or in more hip terms, spooky vibes. Because frankly, it's everywhere, like in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. This is the title screen, and this image right here really freaked me out as a kid. I know it's goofy now, because, you know, it's a skeleton, whatever, but the usage of skeletons in the title screen is very effective and very off-putting, with the lighting itself and all those skeletons being rendered in 3D, sort of giving them an uncanny look. And of course, it doesn't help that the title's theme was this. It gives off this ominous vibe, sort of a mixture of like old school Shaolin movies mixed with the darker synths that you'd hear in older horror movies. What's interesting is that so many of Mortal Kombat's title themes have always had that eerie vibe, with the skeletal imagery and the haunting music. Moving on from those old school vibes from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 to the new 3D era. Deadly Alliance introducing the crypt, and while I'm not familiar with Deadly Alliance crypt itself, the Deception crypt was the one that I thought was the scariest. I had this game as a kid, and the crypt freaked me out a ton. I hated that this was the only way to unlock shit in this game. Funnily enough, the first crypt wasn't really that scary. Like, sure, it's ominous and creepy, but there really wasn't anything that was there that could scare you. The Deception crypt, however, is scarier simply because of shit like this. For a brief moment, you could see these random characters pop in and out from behind the tombstones, and just when you see them, they scurry away. Okay, it's funny now because they look like little roaches and they behave like roaches, but at the same time, I could have sworn there was just like a jump scare just lurking here, but there wasn't. That is until MK9 went, holy fucking shit. Seriously though, MK9 had my personal favorite crypt. Later entries would explore making the crypt a big, large area, like its own separate game, honestly, with puzzles to solve, items to collect, and, you know, all that shit. But honestly, it was just a glorified menu that had a lot more extra steps. And I really do think they hit it right with this one. I absolutely loved exploring the crypt. Oh god, Jesus fucking Christ. And then there's this motherfucker, and he appears whenever he wants. That is the Crypt Monster, a PNG image of a goblin-like thing that just like pops up and it scares you. I don't even think there's a 3D model of him in the game. I could be wrong. It's kind of comical, honestly, when you view it like this, but not really comical when you're trying to just unlock shit. I was a teenager at the time, but even then I was still spooked by this guy. So much so that I tried avoiding the crypt at night just so I wouldn't shit my pants. Wow, I just, repeating that makes me realize how much of a fucking pussy I am sometimes, man. As mentioned before, the crypt evolved from here onwards, becoming more of like a single-player game itself. In MK11, the crypt was a bit more different. There was no crypt monsters to speak of, but the spooky vibes were still there. Seriously though, this whole Shang Tsung Island just sort of becomes like a fun house. It's like a haunted house museum kind of thing. But there was a monster that appeared once you received Kenshi's blindfold, and when you put it on, you're sometimes greeted by this funny little creature. He's spooky the first times, but the moment you realize you can just swat your mace, it becomes less threatening. Still, I love the crypt monsters despite how much they scared me. Well, once. I feel like Deception's crypt was in response to how so many players thought the OG crypt was spooky, so they ramped it up. And then the MK9 one was definitely based off of rumors that were about the jump scares that supposedly existed in Deception, but they never did. So they added that just because they heard about it. I just love that Mortal Kombat bases itself off its own fans' murmurs. It's what makes the franchise unique. Now, of course, I'm a full-grown adult playing MK games. I'm sort of jaded by spooky stuff now. I don't really get creeped out so easily. But I appreciate it nonetheless, because it makes the franchise so unique amongst other fighters. Honestly, it's just very rare that anyone tries to be creepy or dark or paranormal in fighting games, but at the same time, I don't know if MK was ever going for creepy. I don't think so anyways. They were definitely going for something raw and dark, and it works, because that's what this whole franchise is. It's about death and gore, the paranormal, demons, and hell. And that sort of imagery just so happens to align with a lot of creepy things in this world. And no better way to illustrate that than the stages themselves, starting specifically with the Living Forest, the one that creeped me out the most. Man, I remember as a kid crying whenever I saw my cousins playing in the forest stage. Ugh. That forest stage, it was nightmare fuel, genuinely. The forest was eerie and disturbing. The fighters were surrounded by trees that almost looked like they were laughing at them. And these faces are just so horrifying to look at. It. I feel like I'm getting sucked in and... Oh my... Is that a farmer? Well, I never noticed that before. There's a farmer getting absolutely mutilated by the forest itself. Look, one of the vines is like going right through the skull and out the... Wow. Holy shit. I never actually noticed that. Apparently, John Tobias was asked more about this creepy dying farmer. And he said that his name was Amma. And apparently, the only person that knows about this... well, little character is Tony Goski, who was at the time Mortal Kombat's background artist. I actually used to have nightmares about this stage, thinking that the trees all bite my limbs off as a kid, the vines ripping my head off, etc, etc. I guess that's what makes me think that there was a stage fatality involved with this game, but that's not really true, no, is it? No, that actually only happens in Mortal Kombat 9, where the stage came back in glorious HD, and the farmer's here too? I swear, dude, I never noticed that farmer until I started researching for this video. Though, as scary as the Living Forest is, nothing can really compare to its MK4 appearance. Jesus Christ. Look, I know, it's probably the worst iteration of the Living Forest. I mean, really, it looks like shit, dude. But the fact that it does look like shit makes it even scarier. You know what I mean? It's that sort of uncanny valley effect, I guess. Really can't explain it. This is just... really one that I hated the most. It also doesn't help that the Living Forest stage in MK4 sounds like this. And that's just awful. And then there's the pit, an iconic stage by every means, but as someone with acrophobia, I really did not like being in the pit. It was a stage that first started out as a rumor for me. I mean, it existed, right? But as a kid, I didn't know that there was a stage fatality that involved uppercutting the other player into the pit itself. I mean, I should have known that that was the reason it was called the pit, but, you know, I was stupid asshole kid. I didn't really connect the dots. How could I know any better? Well, I'll tell you how. By having one of my friends performing the fucking fatality and seeing one of the combatants get thrown hundreds of feet into the ground. Fuck, that's brutal. I remember jumping out of my chair seeing that and having the pit in my stomach shoot up. You know, that feeling where you just drop down a huge roller coaster ride? Yeah, that was me. I'm telling you, my fucking acrophobia is pretty bad. Also, there was the developers' heads all over the spikes, impaled and everything. And I'm sure it was a joke amongst them. And yeah, obviously, you know, it's kind of funny to see your own friends' heads impaled into a stage. But it's Really not when the Teletubbies was your main source of entertainment, so jumping from this to seeing this was not really a great transition, especially since these are real human people and not just sprites made from drawings, no, like real human actors. Quick shout out to the Combat Tomb for doing the pit, but reversed. It's absurd, but oddly creepy. That of course reminds me of the game over screen from Mortal Kombat 4, where you would just be falling for fucking ever until you press start or you continued, and then you would sort of like hard cut away from this and you'd be saved. But if you didn't, yeah, that happens. It's super, it's man, why was I such a bitch? Now, there's a ton of iterations of the pit, but I still think the first one was the best. It's very minimalistic. Other iterations focus more on adding more spikes and more color, and yeah, aesthetically it is far more pleasing, but if we're talking creepy, this is creepy. The Dead Pools was another stage very similar to the pit in concept, only full of green acid rather than a pit of spikes. The stage itself isn't scary though. Actually, it was supposed to be a lot scarier when background artist Tony Goske, there he is again, revealed that there were supposed to be bodies hanging from the hooks, and this must be some sort of form of Mandela effect, as I could have sworn that there were dead bodies hanging from the hooks. There aren't any, actually, anywhere. At least a skeleton or two, but no, there never really was. This idea can actually be seen in the concept art rather than the actual game. And later on, it was re-implemented in MK9 and later entries, but yeah, early MK games just didn't have this. Weird. The Deadpool has appeared several times throughout the game's history, and honestly, I still think the stage fatality is as effective as it was creepy back then. The idea of sinking into a pool of acid, eating at your skin and tearing away your muscles and nerves all the way down to your bones, that has always been one of those irrational fears that I'm hoping most people have, because otherwise I would sound insane. I do sound insane, don't I? I mean, come on, how many times have you seen lava in a movie or on TV and thought, oh God, I wonder if anyone has ever fallen face first in a pool of lava? You know what I mean? It's my point is, this shit is scary. Popping back up as a spooky skeleton, that's spooky, man. Hell's a stage. It's similar to Deadpool, much more aesthetically creepier, sure, but pretty similar all the same. I mean, it's hell, for Christ's sake. I love every depiction of hell, especially in Mortal Kombat, with these pillars and the bodies all the way that like clump up together and make this horrifying mass of skeletons. It's as if the structures of hell is dependent on the souls of the damned to uphold the very existence of hell. And according to this stage, those kinds of souls are never in short supply. That's brutal, metal, and raw as fuck, and I love it. Now, I could go on about how creepy these stages are, especially the original trilogy stages, but honestly, I can give you a general sweeping impression I had as a child to get you better understanding why they were scary to me, and that of course being that all of these stages had some sort of devilish influence to them. And yeah, cause believe it or not, I was super scared of Satan. I really was as a kid. And I know that sounds really stupid and dumb, but I'm serious. As a kid who grew up with religious parents that constantly told me that not only was I going to hell if I, didn't behave or eat fucking vegetables, they would also describe the agonizing details about how scary hell was. Man, and I was really scared of that sort of imagery. If you were to ask me which of these video games actually look like a game made by Satan worshippers, I'm gonna definitely say Mortal Kombat without hesitation. The imagery of hell and demons, souls, and death, it always freaked me out as a kid. And now I embrace that shit. I mean, this is awesome. Fucking really, it really is. Some sick shit, and revisiting it now, 20 years later, not being afraid of that shit, I love it a ton more than when I was a kid. So, I can't really give you a good description of why I think most of these stages are scary, because that part of me died a long time ago. Now I appreciate this sort of stuff. There's still those wandering memories in the back of my head that trigger an instinct of fight or flight for just a half a second to make me remember briefly of a time when I didn't know any better, but seriously, this is cool. And plus, later stages, while good, aren't nearly as creepy as the ones found in the original trilogy, but they are pretty creepy in their own right, sure. Most of them are just mostly remakes of old stages due to the timelines resetting, especially in the 3D era that more or less sort of had the same concepts, just in a different setting. Like the Deadpools, for example, the acid was still there in many of the stages, just in a different place. Or instead of being, you know, in the smelting pot, the little cauldron that existed in the original MK trilogy, it would be this sort of other factory from Outworld. It's really, you know, the same thing, just different. Even the ones that I was going to mention, like Yin Yang Island, for example, are only sort of creepy and just sometimes goofy. I don't know. Maybe I was too old to find this stuff creepy as a teen. Who knows? I just don't think they're as effective. But there is one thing that has been consistently pretty eerie and pretty creepy and pretty fucking brutal. And those are the fatalities. And we'll talk about that right after this break. In this next half of the video, I'll be talking about the fatalities as well as the characters that make up the game, as I needed to separate them because honestly talking about the fatalities alone might actually demonetize this video, but we'll see about that. So before we start talking about the fatalities and all that stuff, we should also briefly honorably mention some of the character designs in this game. Because yes, there are some characters that are just super freaky in themselves. Now, characters like Baraka, for example, have always been pretty weird and pretty creepy to look at, especially in the old trilogy where he's just a dude with a really creepy rubber face. It looks super uncanny and kind of bad, and that's what kind of made him really unique and just an icon for the franchise in general. Everybody remembers Baraka, especially people who love Melina, and there are way too many people who really love Melina. For some reason, I wonder. But despite that, you can't forget about her face, what hides underneath that mask, that horrible visage that lies behind that mask. A lot of people have said that this is based off of the slit mouth woman. However, I found no such evidence of this being true at all. Like, there's no reputable sources that say that. It's just kind of an estimated guess on that being the inspiration behind Melina's design, but I kind of doubt it. Most of these characters are based off of movies, and I'm just assuming she's also part of a movie. Might have been a Japanese movie that had the slit-mouth woman, but not directly the slit-mouth woman. Then there's characters like Raiden, who are just spooky just because his eyes are glowing. Yes, I was scared of Raiden as a kid. Okay, I was really, really young, alright? He looked creepy. He could barely see his face, and he had glowing eyes. I thought he was just the devil. He's just scary to me, man. I don't know, but not anymore. I just think he's cool. But dude, I don't know. Something about him just really freaked me out. You know what really freaked out a lot of kids, though? Fucking Goro. Not only because he's creepy and uncanny looking compared to the human actors that exist in this game, but also because he's fucking hard. I think he's actually super unfair. He's such a bullshit asshole. But despite that, he has an iconic design that is just as memorable as Baraka or Melina, and just as creepy too. And yet, as spooky as these guys are, and please tell me I'm not alone on this, Scorpion is probably the one that I was scared of the most. Seriously. Not really because of the games, actually, mostly because of the movie. The portrayal of Scorpion wasn't really done properly in hindsight, sure. Regardless, everything else is done very effectively. And though it was really scary to me as a kid, I really appreciate what they did to portray him now as an adult. I remember in particular the way they brought out his spear to life was pretty creative, and I'm not sure if they did that same idea afterwards, but seeing his spear come out of his hand was just so cool. Hell, I think in the original game, it's just a rope with the dagger at the end, and it still is even to this day. Thanks, whoever the fuck texted me. But here, it's a straight up snake that sort of homes in on its target, which I think is fucking awesome. When Johnny Cage went to hell with him, dude, that shit gave me nightmares because I'm fucking afraid of hell. And as a kid, being exposed to this fucking concept of hell is maddening. It's not like brimstone and fire. It's straight up skulls, like cobwebs. Everything's made out of bones. That's rad as fuck, but it's scary to a kid. It was just, you know, just dead bodies everywhere. Rickety bridges? Why? Bamboo sticks. Wait, actually, this is getting goofy. It's super inventive, though. Seriously. If I were stuck in here, I'd go fucking insane. I also love that Scorpion is super courteous, though.
Welcome.
What a gentleman. But let's cut the shit. Let's talk about the fatalities. Seeing blood and guts, I'm sure is really cool for some kids. But at the same time, when Mortal Kombat was really popular, I just barely started elementary school, so I wasn't in that violence is awesome phase. I was still in my rosy cheek Catholic boy phase, and seeing the fatalities in this game messed me up something good. Now again, this is Traumathon. I'm not going to talk about the more recent fatalities because, well, they're very recent, and also they're the sort of thing that people get demonetized for, so for the sake of the video, I'm only going to mention the old school shit. And let me tell you, you can't get any more old school than the iconic Sub-Zero fatality. This image right here was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was the shit before the storm. The reason why games got banned and why we have a rating system. And for me, it was a source of nightmares. Now, obviously, some of these fatalities are straight up goofy, and the dev team amped up the goofy vibes even further when they made each corpse blow up into like 1,000 different body parts, some of which are just repeating body parts. In fact, most of them are. Seriously, why the hell do some of these dudes have like 37 legs and 44 arms and like 5 heads? Then there are the more lame, goofy fatalities like Quan Chi's neck stretch thing. That sucks. That's not really scary. I mean, he does have that one awesome fatality where he rips out your leg and starts beating you to death with it. That's also not scary, but that's really fucking funny. But let's narrow our gaze into the more spooky kills. And obviously we won't be mentioning brutalities, animalities, and babalities, but it's always cool that Mortal Kombat had multiple ways to kill you, and it's what made these games so fun and memorable. Enough fucking around though, let's talk creepy fatalities. We already talked about Sub-Zero's fatality, which sparked controversy around the world. Then we spoke briefly about Scorpion, who is a revenant, and when he takes off his mask, we can see a burning skull face, which to me still looks effectively creepy in the older games. Obviously in the newer games it doesn't really hit as well. I mean, it does kind of, but it doesn't hit nearly as well as the older games, which had real people, and when you mix that up with these kinds of imageries, well, you get something that's pretty creepy and kind of serious looking rather than the newer games. Some people were actually scared off by the fatality of Cabal though, one of my favorite characters. He had this cool Mad Max-like getup that always seemed rad to me, and when he took off his mask, I remember some people finding that creepy. Hell, the face is so fucking scary that it literally scares his opponents to death. See what I mean by goofy? You get a lot of those from the older games, but what really gets kind of creepy is when they have more weird imagery involved, like this one where Sindel screams at her opponent so hard that their fucking skin is ripped out of their body, leaving this creepy looking corpse. Or the weird ones where Kano rips off someone's entire skeletal structure from their body, leaving this like little puddle of human on the floor. Shiva does the same shit, and it's like, man, I don't know, something weird about that. Some society shit right there. Y'all ever watch that movie? You know, we should talk about it someday. Shang Tsung got some fucked up fatalities too, and I can imagine as a designer he must be really fun to make up fatalities for, because he's a sorcerer and he can pretty much fuck with anyone or reality in any way he wants. But the one fatality of his that I love the most is the one where he straight up takes your soul in the second game. I love that shit. It's actually really well animated and super creepy looking. And I know I wasn't gonna mention modern fatalities because they're too new, but dude, how am I not going to mention this fucking horrifying fatality where he's hanging someone by their limbs and letting fiends from hell rip their fucking guts out? It is so cool. God damn, I love Shang Tsung. But speaking of animations, there aren't any in particular that come to mind, but any fatality that has characters burn alive and dance around as a skeleton or get burned from acid, those are always really creepy. And again, it comes down to just the sheer uncanny valley sort of look to Mortal Kombat. These guys are all played by real actors, and sure, they're tuned up here and there to look more animated, but they sort of make the fatalities pop out more and seem unnerving. And while those old fatalities aren't nearly as creative as nowadays, they're still 100 times creepier because of the realness. So when we move on to the new 3D era, they get more creative because now they have camera angles and they can manipulate the camera in any way they want, show more detail, yet I really don't think any of these are that crazy or that spooky, to be real with you. Save of course for, I don't know, MK4 fatalities, which had these specific fatalities where you could just strip someone of their fucking skin, and it's like, wow, that's so creepy, man. I don't know, just look at that face. That is like some live leak shit right there. But MK9 does bring back a lot of the creep factor with a ton of these fatalities, and I seriously mean it's fucking disturbing. One that sticks out to me personally was the Sector fatality. This one in particular, this one. That's so fucking brutal. It's actually like disturbing, actually. Like, I remember showing this to my sister and she always said that the shit was like straight out of a horror movie. Ermac got a pretty fucked up fatality too, where he tears off the limbs of his opponents, leaving them in the air, writhing in pain, and finishes them off by smashing their fucking skull into the floor, leaving nothing but their torso. Noob's fatality drags their opponent to the literal shadow realm, cuts off their bottom half, and has them crawling in agonizing pain, and he just leaves them there to bleed out and die. Cool. That's nowhere near as bad as his other fatality though, where he tears a motherfucker in half with his shadow clone, and it's just sickening to watch, man. That's so... wow. Smoke's fatality, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. What happened here? What happened? Like, what? Did he vibrate their molecules so hard that they just self-destructed? What the hell? Oh, and his alternate fatality ain't any better. God damn, dude, chill out. Sub-Zero's infamous spinal fatality gets a remake, and it's far more brutal than before. Cool. But speaking of brutal, Scorpion straight up has the most metal fucking fatality ever. Sick. And Kung Lao also got one of the rawest fatalities too. And these are the good guys, by the way. You wouldn't think that though when he does this. He puts his little hat on the floor, which is like a buzzsaw, and he just like drags his opponents by force as they're screaming their fucking guts out and begging him not to do it. And he just like cuts them right through as they're screaming in agony and writhing in pain. And then he just holds up the corpse in the air like, yay, I did it. Wasn't that sick? It sure was. So you can tell that the HD era of the Mortal Kombat games gave us some real fucking brutal and inventive fatalities, and even MK1 has some fatalities that are just nightmare fuel, but again, this is Traumathon, so we can't talk too much about those. Though I should maybe someday make a tier list of like fatalities that are creepy / disturbing, but for now, I think we're gonna wrap it up here before I really get demonetized. In conclusion though, it's really not surprising just how horrifying this game franchise can be. And even nowadays, I still find myself looking up the old artwork from back when the original trilogy in the 3D era existed, and I get nostalgic all over again. It truly is an inspiring piece of work that I still love to this very day, that has so many horror-adjacent vibes that I still am really digging even now. But man, when I was a kid, I didn't understand what I loved. But nowadays, I'm fully embracing this. During the late 90s, Cartoon Network saw a rise of new viewers as their channel grew by the month. CN wanted to go even further by offering Action Center cartoons and anime to their audience via a new programming block called Toonami. The first host of Toonami was Moltar, but seldom anyone ever really remembers him, and that's likely because, well, he was sort of eclipsed by his successor, Tom, a chubby little homo that loves anime and hosting shows. Neat. The audience could really feel at home with Tom and his spaceship, the Absolution, as we got more and more familiar with his personality and his hologram AI sidekick, Sarah. Things felt homier with Tom as the host, feeling really chill. It had a real just chill vibe to it, and that's sort of the crux as to why Toonami was so successful. Let's face it, the real reason so many of us were hooked on Toonami was the simple fact that it was cool, and I mean that by every definition. It had cool beats, it had cool aesthetics, it had a cool host. CG animation and cartoons were also rare back then, so the style was cool, and Tom just was cool himself. And of course, there was the centerpiece of it all, the anime, which at the time was slowly being introduced to the West. Previously though, anime was mostly word of mouth. You'd go to a VHS store and see these weird cartoons you never heard of, and sometimes you can't even pronounce, but you notice it looks different. It attracts your eyes, and you buy it, and oh shit, it's hentai. Okay. Now with Toonami, anime was rocketed to the mainstream pretty quickly, especially mainstays like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, which only solidified the cool factor that Toonami was running on. Yeah, shit was dope for a while. But things changed.
During an airing of Toonami in the year 2000, they began promoting an event that was going to occur on September 18th called
The Intruder, a week-long Toonami event where you affect the outcome.
Thanks, Peter Cullen. It was part of Toonami's new experimental miniseries type endeavor, which they called the Total Immersion Event, or TIEs. These TIEs would prove to be a chance for Toonami to get audience participations in small, fun ways. It usually involves a small minigame that the audience can participate in and has a grand prize that a lucky few viewers can win. It was a way to get more people watching. Not that Toonami was doing bad at this point or anything like that, but it certainly helped boost ratings for the block when the first tie was happening. And let me tell you, the first tie, The Intruder, it was a fucking memorable one and a real spooky miniseries too. So let's talk about it. Huge shoutouts, by the way, to Slim D716 for re-uploading the entire miniseries in fucking crisp as shit 4K 60 FPS. I'm sorry, I really need to mention how good this looks. Dude, I remember this short looking like shit when I was a kid. Like, all my memories of this event when it happened look exactly like this. In reality, it was probably worse, because I was a bastard. I put magnets on my CRT because I like the pretty colors. It's astounding how good this holds up and looks fucking clean and sleek. Like, I swear, this looks better than most video games nowadays. I'm not even kidding. I mean, seriously, have you seen some of the... Go watch the original video after you're done watching this. Seriously, it's so beautiful. Anyways, let's get back on track. In episode 1, Tom is seen casually talking to Sarah, being very jovial, making jokes, when she warns him of an intruder on board. Tom takes it pretty lightly, doesn't really think much of it, until he sees that the intruder breached the hull. Episode 2, Tom further investigates with his cute little gun. Seriously, what a fucking cute dork. I love you so much, you pot-bellied Tom. Then he finds a room with no lights, and then, without warning, Tom is knocked the fuck out by this thing. We soon learn in episode 3 that the intruder is this red blob thing that has no real form or shape, but knows only how to eat, and it's constantly growing and always hungry. Tom and Sarah don't really know what it is or what it really wants, but they do know that it needs to be stopped immediately. That's when we reach episode 4. Ooh. I should mention first that though I may be paraphrasing each episode and sort of getting the important details out there, the miniseries thus far has had a very eerie vibe to it. There's this air of mystery abound with the intruder's existence, and we, as the audience, the dumb kids that we are, don't really know what's happening or what's going to happen. We're constantly intrigued by what is going on and eagerly waiting for the next episode. Each part shows us small amounts of info, and if you were one of the kids that were participating in the Flash game, you'd also see a part of the story most wouldn't see, and that's a side story featuring the Clydes and how they're constantly being consumed by the intruder, and it's up to you, the bigger brother Clyde thing, to save them. This Flash game, by the way, was apparently hard as fuck, but I wouldn't know, I never played it. So I felt personally that this miniseries succeeded in being immersive. It was a series that got you at the edge of your seat, waiting to see what happens next, and I really need to mention this. Toonami itself was a rarity in TV programming. Like, there really weren't that many CG cartoons during this time, even CG cartoon movies. I think the only ones that existed at this point that were big budgeted were Toy Story and A Bug's Life. As for animated cartoon shows, I mean, I'm trying to remember here. There was like Beast Wars, Reboot. That was a fantastic show, by the way. Everyone should watch that. Donkey Kong Country, Roly Poly Oly, and I think that's about it, actually. I'm sure there's more, but my point is that it was a developing thing, and Toonami was just a short programming block that occasionally showed Tom and the Absolution. It was easily done. I mean, it looked great, but it didn't really need much technical know-how. It just needed to be done for that one specific reason, which was to just show a few minutes of animation. Yet this was their true foray into being an animated series, and it is beautifully executed, as you can see here. It was different, and it was engaging, and small details here and there made the short series feel alive. But the most important detail to all of this is that most of us had known Tom for about a year or so now at this point, and to a kid, that's a long time. So knowing all of that, the suspense being built up, the beautiful animation, the connections we as the audience had not only with the shorts, but with Tom as a character, It all led to probably the most traumatic and genuinely terrifying deaths in any animated short I had ever seen as a kid. Check it out. That is fucked. Tom literally screams in agony as he is corroded alive. His final appearance shows his decaying hand and the wires exposed and the hand full of rust in a matter of seconds. It's super scary. And it makes it all the scarier when you realize that kids, again, had grown an attachment for the little guy. Everyone watched Toonami growing up. Well, everyone who had cable anyways. And it was hard to miss since it showed up every single day on Cartoon Network, except for Sundays, of course. We as kids loved Tom. We loved Toonami. And yet, he just dies. Discarded. Just sort of gone. For good. But, I mean, you know, he's the main character, you think. He really can't be dead, right? Main characters don't die, right?
Tom is dead.
Thanks, Peter Cullen. This is a core memory for me, or I don't know what that means. I just kind of hear it from TikTok users anyways. But yeah, dude, I remember coming back home, turning on the TV, watching some stuff, and then I saw episode 4 pop up. And as soon as Tom died, and that whole ending sequence happened, I heard this.
Tom is dead.
They confirm that Tom died so hard, but it's so funny, like seconds as soon as you saw that, they show this promo and just straight up said, yeah, Tom's dead. But it's okay, Tom 2's around the corner, so it's totally fine. Yeah, so Tom 2 was pretty much the main reason this whole event was made. At least it sort of seems like that. It seemed like they were pretty eager to have Steve Blum just voice the new Tom, and they probably wanted to get rid of the old Tom's designs anyways, you know, because he didn't really fit the cool vibes anymore. It sort of clashes what they were going for. So they had a sleek, cool body for the new Tom and a nice black navy blue kind of look, and it looks pretty cool. So after Tom is revived, which would be the first of several times that'll happen in Toonami's history, Tom 2 gets to work. He severs the engine and eliminates the intruder once and for all. And once that happens, the audience gets to choose the new engine for the Absolution. And the people ultimately voted for the Talon ST, fulfilling the quote-unquote outcome that kept getting mentioned during the tie. Yeah, I figured there was a way to maybe get a good ending where Tom doesn't die. I used to think that for about a couple of years, but realistically, these were coming out daily, and there's no way they animated that many different outcomes, so I'm assuming this is the only thing that the audience had any control over. And I tried looking it up. I tried to see if maybe the Flash games tied into something else and you could change some outcomes here and there, but no, it seems like the voting was pretty much the only thing that audience members could do. So Tom was destined to die. But it's okay. Once you were done voting for that shit, you could have participated in winning the grand prize, and that being winning a free trip to Japan and getting to visit Nintendo HQ. Yeah, seriously, apparently you could have just gone to Nintendo HQ and been a quote-unquote playtester for the day. And so concludes an admittedly fun miniseries that happened for 1 week on the first fall of the new millennia. You just had to be there. Nothing can describe the feeling of watching that happen as it happened. And since then, Toonami had done several ties, some more involving than others, and others being weirder than some. But The Intruder lives on as one of the most memorable ties Toonami had ever done. It's so popular, in fact, that they made 2 sequels to The Intruder. In the sequel, Tom 1 actually comes back, fused with The Intruder itself. It's pretty grim, but rad as fuck. And as for the third one, well, you should check it out for yourself, honestly. The fact of the matter is, though, the first Intruder is symbolic of Toonami itself. Things change. Sometimes the things we grew up with don't last forever, and Toonami died at some point, but it was revived back to life, and now it's growing stronger, and still pulling off these ties now and again to the thrill
of its now aging audience that still shows its passion and love for this small programming block. Toonami is as strong as its viewers are interested, and they're so passionate and interested, they have kept this series going on since its revival longer than it's been alive before on Cartoon Network. And it doesn't seem like Toonami's slowing down anytime soon. So sometimes the things you love while going away can sometimes change and become something new, something better, and something that can be with you and love you for so much longer. When I first started Traumathon, I actually didn't really have any scripts for most of the entries that I had the first time around. Then again, I didn't really have 30 videos the first time around either, so it was kind of a crapshoot. But I did sort of miss the format of just talking about whatever I wanted and the spooky experiences that I had personally, and I kind of want to do that with Resident Evil, because I'm kind of shocked to know that even though I've covered Resident Evil 4 a few times, I've never actually talked about the first game, which I love a ton. Sure, I could talk about the in-between stuff, the development, the production, the Capcom, and what their influences were, but I kind of don't really want to do that. I feel like there's so many people on YouTube who've already covered Resident Evil in such great detail that I don't really have much else to add other than, yeah, it's a fucking amazing game and I kind of just like to geek out about it sometimes. So I hope you don't mind, but this episode's a little different. I'm going off script. I'm just going to talk my mind about something that I loved, and I hope you enjoy my little ramblings, and I hope you can relate too, because honestly this game means so much to me and probably influenced a lot of what I love about video games and horror in general today. First of all, I'll start out with the PS1 version, which I never actually played at all. I actually got super scared of it, and whenever I saw my cousins play it, which is a lot because they owned it, I really didn't like it. I think actually the first time I tried playing it was back in Mexico. See, in Mexico there weren't really places where you could buy video games conventionally, at least of course not in my area. My area was very rural and it was more like living in the middle of the desert, honestly. And so some people, instead of selling them, would actually sell time, at least in my area, time to play the video games themselves. So there was this one little store where they let you play for like an hour for like, I don't know, 10 pesos or something like that. And then you got about an hour or so to play the games that you wanted. I usually played a lot of PlayStation games actually in Mexico, mainly because I didn't have a PlayStation and couldn't afford one either. So that's how I sort of got exposed to a lot of PlayStation games. But the one my cousin always played, because he's the one who took me because he was an adult, was Resident Evil. And I always saw him play it and not really know what the hell he was doing and then just die. But I do remember one infamous thing that happened in the game that kind of stuck with me forever, genuinely forever. And that's the part where Jill first meets the zombie, the one that's chewing on, I think, Kenny? Sorry, it was Kenneth, but I was close anyways. I just remembered his name being that because they were sort of making like a South Park joke. Oh my god, they killed Kenny, whatever. And I remember that version that I saw was actually worse than the one that most people remembered, because it actually has the decapitated head, the uncensored version, and that was fucking gnarly. It was crazy. That shit scarred me. And of course the zombie turning around slowly added to that creep factor. So I kind of knew at a very early age I don't want to play Resident Evil ever at all, and so I didn't. I actually didn't even know there were 4 Resident Evils until Resident Evil 4 came out. I just assumed that it was a one-time thing that existed and that was it. But then when Resident Evil 4 came out, I wanted to explore more of Resident Evil's franchise because I really loved Resident Evil 4 a ton. It's one of my favorite games ever. So of course I borrowed or probably stole RE1 Remake for the GameCube. And it was fucking scary. It was one of the scariest games I had played. And it's definitely, I think Resident Evil 4, it definitely dulled down my creep factor, because I was like, oh, if this is how all the Resident Evil games were, then maybe I was just exaggerating. Maybe they're not as scary. No, RE1 is fucking creepy. If you don't know anything about it and it's your first time playing it and you're easily creeped out like I was as a kid, it's something that you don't really want to explore alone in the middle of the night, which I did, and it fucking sucked, but I loved it a ton. I think the main contributors to me loving Resident Evil 1 and not totally minding the creepiness of it is that it really felt like a strategy game more than it did a horror game. Sure, of course, there are many outstanding games that are very scary during that era. The ones that did shine are the ones I avoided because I was a fucking pussy. But RE1 did something that I feel like a lot of horror games struggle to do even now, which is to be fun and to also be scary, if that makes any sense. It's why I'm not really a huge fan of a lot of horror games, because a lot of them focus on either being a walking simulator or focus a lot more on the action where it just becomes comical. But RE1 really nails it right down in the center, where it's very scary, very atmospheric. I mean, there's like almost no music throughout the entire game, and you always had to focus and keep an eye out on how much ammo you had, as well as the zombies that you killed, because yes, if you kill the zombies and you don't burn their bodies, they will come back to life as Crimson Heads, in which they are far more powerful, way faster, and take a lot more damage. And that is something that they don't tell you unless, of course, you read the fucking files, which a lot of people don't. They sort of skip that shit. But I knew what to do. They told me all about that. A little too late though, because there were definitely a lot of Crimson Heads running around when I found the file. But hey, I knew at that point what to do. So it was a scary game with scary atmosphere. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you might have ended up not being able to fight any zombies pretty much at all, unless you were really good with the knife, which was almost impossible to be good at the knife with in the first try. But I do remember playing as Chris at first and not really knowing where to go, not really knowing what to do. And then I met a point where I had no more ammo, I had nothing left, and I wondered if Jill's campaign was any easier. And then it was. It sort of is anyways. She has a little bit of a nerf when it comes to her shooting enemies. They don't really have critical hit. The critical hit chances, I think, way smaller than Chris's, but her inventory space is king. It's the thing that really makes Resident Evil and any survival horror way more tolerable. Like, I genuinely don't care if Chris can take more hits or kill enemies easier. The fact that she has way more inventory space is so much better to me anyways. So booting up her campaign, I found that I really enjoyed the game way more because I knew what I was doing, I knew where to go generally, and the puzzles for the game kind of were amazing actually. It's nonsensical to think about it nowadays that a huge mansion has so many stupid like puzzles, and they kind of sort of explain why the Spencer mansion has so many puzzles with the weird throwaway file that they add to the lore, but it's still stupid as fuck. However, it adds so much to the game that I genuinely really enjoyed. I think having those breaks in between from shooting zombies to just solving a puzzle is delightful, honestly. And that's what sort of hooked me onto Resident Evil pretty much for life. And just survival horror in general, just this wonderful little genre of horror where you're limited with supplies and you have to think about the way you do things, about the way you solve things. And understand that not everybody really likes survival horror just because it can be a little clunky on purpose, or it is just infuriating or maybe too scary for some of you. But honestly, check out Resident Evil 1. The remake anyways. I'm not really sure about RE1 Director's Cut or RE1 the original for the PS1. I've never really played the whole thing before. I've tried them. I mean, I've tried them now. They're fine. They're fun games, but RE1 Remake is something else. It enhances pretty much everything that RE1 PS1, anyways, the original, did, but better. It has better puzzles. It has better puzzle placements. It's got great replayability. And the graphics for this game hold the fuck up. Like, really, they do. See, all these games use pre-rendered graphics in which there is sort of this 3D collision and model that they have for the game, but it's all layered under this wonderful 3D render that they have that's just mostly just a picture that looks super convincing and looks good as shit. I guess the way I would describe it as like I can't believe I'm saying this. If you've played Five Nights at Freddy's, those models are pre-rendered. They look good as shit. I mean, they still kind of do, actually, because they're pre-rendered models. They're not, you know, there's no anti-aliasing on it. It's all already made. So because of this, it makes the mansion look beautiful. And seriously, the mansion has so many environments that it almost feels like the setting itself is a character of its own. You need to traverse the mansion a lot, and you get to be familiar with a lot of the locations, a lot of the placements. Sometimes you lose yourself as to where exactly you need to go next, but then there's the map, and the map is pretty useful as it tells you what doors are locked and what rooms you haven't explored yet. But let me tell you, playing the game for the first time can shock you just how deep this mansion can go. It seems like just an innocuous mansion that has just a bunch of zombies running around and weird creatures and that thing. I don't know about those. Oh yeah, and a giant snake. It's all weird, but once you start unraveling the mysteries behind the mansion, you start going deeper into it, you find out more about it and the betrayals that happen behind the scenes and all that junk. It becomes an engaging story. These people that were in the mansion, the scientists that existed there, are all suffering through their own experiences that don't really get talked about unless you read the files, which I'm trying to put an emphasis on because these files are pretty fun to read and they're really engaging and give so much depth into the mansion and what happened. And then of course there's part of the remake that isn't really ever, I think, explored in the original, and that's Lisa Trevor, the most tragic character in pretty much any RE game ever, and probably in just video game history. It's one of the most disturbing characters I've ever seen in a video game, actually. I won't really talk too much about her and what she's all about. I'm really trying to be careful to share my experience with you without actually spoiling the game, because I know that there are quite a few people who've never played Resident Evil and are probably curious as to what the whole franchise is all about, especially with the release of the RE4 remake that came out this year, which is fucking awesome. So I'll reserve myself with some of the things that I want to talk about, but I definitely would recommend everyone and anyone who's never played this game to just try it for yourself. I promise you, even though it's scary, even though it has janky controls by today's standards, although I would argue that tank controls are pretty fucking cool, trust me, once you get past all that, you will have one of the most unique experiences you will ever have. It is a fantastic game that I replay constantly, even now. On my worst days, on the days where I'm the saddest, I genuinely just boot it up and play the campaign all over again. I don't know, it's something about this game is so alluring to me. It's ironic because I was so afraid of it for so long in my life, but once I actually played it and when I actually beat it, I couldn't put it down. I came back to it, and I still come back to it every year, every Halloween, just to play it one more time. So I just love it that much. It's genuinely one of the most chillest games I've ever played now that I know what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to play it as soon as Halloween is over. Fuck it, why don't I play it on Halloween? You guys want to see me stream that? Whatever, you'll see. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. What if I told you there was a film so profound, so disturbing, that it stopped an entire war from happening? That it changed policies so that nuclear weapons could be more monitored and possibly even, hopefully, eradicated? Well, there exists such a film, and it's called The Day After. Written by Edward Hume and directed by Nicholas Meyer, who you might recognize as the guy who wrote and directed The Wrath of Khan and co-wrote The Prince of Egypt. The Day After is a critically acclaimed movie that aired on TV and received several accolades and was at one point the highest rated TV show of all time for nearly 30 years. So, what makes this film so special? Why are we talking about it today? It's not a horror film by any means, so what gives? Well, believe it or not, lots of people actually contacted me about The Day After, and for good reason. It is a film that brought America, if not the world, to its knees, as it showed the horrors of war and the possibilities of a nuclear fallout. The very end of the world, in probably the most realistic portrayal of a nuclear holocaust ever shown on TV to horrifying detail. The movie really can be summed up into three parts. The beginning part that shows us our characters and their current problems. The middle, which shows us the tensions rising and the lead up to the disaster that awaits our characters. And the last half of the film that focuses on our characters and how they adapt to the situation, or more fair to say, how they try to survive as long as they can. Let me just say that this movie is old, but I reckon most of you haven't watched it. It holds up pretty well, if a bit slow, but the realistic depiction of nuclear fallout is haunting. So if you ever wanted to experience for yourself a sort of realistic telling of what a post-apocalyptic America would look like, please do yourselves a favor and watch the movie. I assure you it's worth it. For everyone else, let's discuss this movie a bit and what makes it so memorable and, for so many, so haunting, despite it not being a horror film. Firstly, we got to mention the characters, not because any of them are remarkable or anything, but because all of them are so incredibly unremarkable, actually, that it brings about this grounded reality to them all. At the beginning of this film, everyone has possibly the simplest problems people could have, and that's the key word here, people, not just Americans. These are problems anyone can face. It's a girl that's afraid to commit to her partner, a wife and a husband that are worried for their daughter, a soldier trying to stay strong despite knowing he has to leave his wife and kid again, a young couple talking about their future, etc., etc. Simple problems, overcasted by a worldwide apocalypse, and most of them are none the wiser until it suddenly happens. But we'll get to that. I think what I love the most about this movie is the dialogue. Genuinely, these characters talk about really, really mundane stuff, sometimes broken up by the sudden reminder that the world is in danger. I love this one scene near the beginning of the film where these four soldiers are talking about vacation plans. One guy wants to go fishing, another guy plans to go on a vacay with his wife, but one soldier is reading the newspaper, and he tells them not to get too excited. And then all four of them, loquacious one moment, are dead silent the next. And this is around 10 minutes of the film. It makes sense that the soldiers are more aware of political affairs and the possibilities of war, but everyone else for the next 30 or so minutes of the film are still talking about their small town affairs in Kentucky. Seriously, there's just moments where the dialogue is just about frivolous things, but that makes the film all the more haunting. And I gotta say, man, I know this is made in the Cold War, where tensions were high and people thought that the world was going to end legitimately, but man, not to get too political, but with the state of the world now, I can't help but notice small things about this movie that I'm sure people back then also noticed. You start to see small things, you get a little paranoid about other stuff, you notice things that make you a bit nervous, really. And listen, it's no secret that there's a nuke scene in this film, and most of us are waiting for it to happen any minute now. Everyone knows that, even people who watched it back then. But what's scary, as someone who's never watched it before, if your first time watching this actually, you don't really know when that'll happen. So there are these moments where you think things are going to escalate, and the nuke scene is right around the corner, but then it's really just nothing, and people just talk for another 10 minutes or so. Not even about the war, just about, like, again, small town things like marriage and junk. There's this one scene that I like, and I don't even know if it's done on purpose, but this young lady is talking to her father, a major character in this entire film. And by the way, there's so many characters in this film that I can't even be bothered to remember everyone's names. But she talks to her dad about her boyfriend, and then suddenly you hear this.
I bet never been inside in 15 years. Well, come on.
That is just an ambulance siren. But knowing that this film has an inevitable nuke scene, it gets you thinking for a split second that those are the sirens that are going to warn you that the nukes are going to drop. But of course, it doesn't. And everything's just back to normal. It's kind of creepy, actually. The anticipation I feel is just horrendous. You're just kind of getting snippets of things going wrong around the world, waiting for that one scene to happen, and then it doesn't. This old couple talks about their lives, their daughter, and then it cuts to them listening to the news about rising tensions. They get worried, they embrace each other lovingly, and they're scared that they won't wake up in the morning. But then they do, and it's a brand new day. Oh, gosh. It's so good, dude. Like, it really is. The tension just keeps rising as things escalate in the background without you really even noticing that much. Then the mundane stuff, the more humanistic stuff, once it's over, it hard cuts back to the news of more rising tensions. Something's going to happen. Something's right around the corner. Sorry, I can't get over this. You genuinely get so nervous watching this movie, especially as things start to rise up and more people become aware of the state of the world. It's no longer focusing on small town stuff. Suddenly you start to notice that the characters in this movie are no longer able to avoid the situation. Something's right around the corner. It's coming. It's actually kind of frightening how things escalate really fast, too. Seriously, 1 minute we're talking about a wedding happening tomorrow. And this guy's just getting his hair cut for that. But then people start to panic, listening to the news. They start hoarding shit because they know that something's about to go down. But what's the point? Really, what's the point of even hoarding? Everyone's in a hurry. They go somewhere, maybe go home, or maybe they fight about something. The cuts between the scenes are frantic and fast. We're in this one scene for a few seconds, and then we're in the next for another few seconds. We don't even spend a minute on some scenes. They just happen one at a time, back to back. Things are happening, but something else is coming. Something people aren't prepared for. Something that can't be stopped because it's coming. And then the nukes have dropped. The next part of this film is just people attempting to survive. There's nothing left. It happened. It's all gone now. There's no cure. There's no happy ending. No solution. Just survive. Why survive, though? What's the point? Everything's gone. Everything's dead. Everyone who survived will suffer to the end of their days. Everyone who died were granted mercy. We see various scenes in different scenarios of people trying their best to just live, to just exist in this pointless, rotten, desolate world. Symbolism is scattered throughout this film, like this memorial that still stands in the middle of the town, but before it lie a dead man and a dead child. Or this one scene where this one character is suffering from radiation poisoning, a fate that most of the other characters are facing. And as she's about to die off, cry, she knows that she's going to end her life and everything's over for her in a couple of days. She won't be alive till then. We get this one shot of her right below a basketball hoop, symbolizing how she just got dunked on by the Soviet Union. The film ends with a harrowing message, a warning to the world and the world leaders that govern this world, that what this movie portrays isn't even close to how horrible real nuclear fallout would be. The real thing would be much, much worse. And the rest is history, literally. President Ronald Reagan saw this film and it shook him something fierce. He wrote about it in his diary, talking about how the film was more than just an eye-opener. It frankly frightened him. It left him, quote, greatly depressed. As it did the Soviet Union. Both nations, for the first time, agreed on something. Nukes are fucked up. And so they signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which vowed to eliminate all nuclear and conventional long-range ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles. Problem solved, right? Well, listen, I don't want to get too political. I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid that when you're talking about this subject, but let's leave it a little light. If you've played Metal Gear Solid, you know that this treaty didn't actually end the war. It pretty much only delayed it. Nuclear weapons still exist. Tensions are rising again. The treaty in itself has proven ineffective, and even now we wonder if what we're watching before us was a work of fiction or a truth just waiting to be told. Time will tell. Time will tell.